to the October 15th meeting of the Camden Select Board. Our meetings are broadcast live on Spectrum Cable TV Channel 1303 and web streamed at youtube.com/Town of Camden, Maine, all one word. And if you wish to participate remotely, go to the Town of Camden website and you can click on the Zoom meeting link there. And once you have done so, if you wish to be recognized, raise your hand and we will do our best to acknowledge you in a timely way. That said, we'll start with public comment on non-agenda items. Mark Ratner, please come up and introduce yourself.
I will
And
do that. That's exactly what I'm here to do.
okay,
My name is Mark Ratner, and I'm just here to put a face to the name for people that don't recognize my face. I'm on the November 5th ballot. I'm the Democratic candidate for County Commissioner District 3, which would include Camden, Rockport, Hope, Vinyl Haven, North Haven, Owl's Head, and some of the other island territories. And that's what I'm here for.
great.
Anybody have any questions?
Thank
Okay,
you, Mark.
have a great meeting,
All right.
and thank you.
Thanks. You get to leave. You've been here though. I know. All right,
He'll be watching us live.
Andrew. And Dave.
Oh, you're gonna, okay. Well, good evening. My name's Andrew Stanchoff, and I'm here representing the Camden Rockport Pedestrian Pathways Committee. And I'd like to present a short video that was made and produced by Pathway members. And it depicts some of the more obvious problems that we see that exist with a section of sidewalk from Rennie's Plaza down to the intersection of Main Street and Union Street. And I hope that this highlights some of the important issues that need to be addressed with this section of sidewalk. So as a committee, we're committed to improving safety for all street users, and especially cyclists, bicyclists, and pedestrians. Thank you. And Jeff, roll the clip.
I'll try.
Where is it?
Oops, it's not up there.
I know.
Oh, it's very good.
Should I do it again?
Oh, was that it?
No.
That's
No.
very short.
That's the way, title.
No, I just, okay, I think it's, here it comes.
Camden
I
High.
start it again, okay?
Right, I was gonna try.
At least on this side, we do have the ability to make it wider.
Right, it's gonna get down to.
I am?
Thank you. That's just the way it's going to walk.
Elm Street.
But this is very wide here, you know, there is actually a lot of room. One of the things, they're saying is we could.
Actually, this is the
take all
wrong,
this here, this.
this is
and
the
make
wrong
this a
video.
Wide sidewalk, right where I'm walking.
I don't know how
Right
we got
video?
the wrong video. Sorry. It's almost the right video. Technical, hang on.
It
How
was
do
a
I get to-
sidewalk.
Sorry, bear with me.
There's one all the way at the bottom.
Could be. But that's not. Sorry.
I think they're close enough.
Yeah. Oh, well. Is that working? Just how we
Would
thought
it
it
be
would.
possible to get these guys back on the agenda on a future night?
Yeah,
It's only 3 minutes, Tom. I'm sorry.
Almost over.
All right.
There you go. Right there. Continue.
this is the one that you were playing that you said wasn't the right one.
You could fast forward a little.
Very good. Actually, would be very.
There we go. I'll just move it ahead.
But this is very wide here, you know, there is actually a lot of room. One of the things, they're saying is we could take all of this here, and make this a wide sidewalk, right where I'm walking. Or you could just almost abandon this. But yeah, I mean, the telephone poles are trucked up.
We need this as bicycle travel lane. We need that as sidewalk. Far enough away from traffic.
Or you could make it all like Main Street though.
It's scary. Yeah.
I mean, see, this car was about this truck. They just, see, this, they're like coming into this lane, but. Really attempt to go to Rennie's, or would you not attempt it at all?
Not on this sidewalk, if I come and go, because I live on Union Street, so I would come up Union Street, cut through the apartments, come up this broken path, and go across here to go to Rennie's. But then if I wanted to go down the alley, I would go all the way back home and go down on the other way. Sidewalk's not safe, the street's dangerous. I do use the sidewalk, I do go across there, I can go to Rennie's, and then I go down that side, but when you get to the part where the stairs are, then I go out the street. And then go back up on the sidewalk after I get past the stairs.
Say a small prayer.
I look for traffic, say a prayer. So,
Yeah, because you would have the same problem of, on this elevated sidewalk with the sidewalk bypass.
Oh, yeah.
It's just, and I
right
think,
now, there's no snow, so you can get through. And then the other thing is I'm usually with somebody, whether it's somebody who's trying to help me shop, or somebody, a child I'm trying to take somewhere, or somebody who's trying to help me, which is sometimes both. And then there's not room for me to keep them safe and for us to walk safely together. It's hard to say with people that live in these.
this is a great little,
Whole section, a whole.
I'm surprised you can do it.
This is good. This is scary.
Yeah.
So there are sections that we didn't show that are only 16 inches wide, further towards intersection of Main and Union, and she couldn't go through there. She had to go out into the break or the passing lane, turning lane to get up through there, and that's kind of scary. But anyway, I hope you get the idea, and it's just to give you an impression of what's going on there. So thank you.
Great. Thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Is that yours?
One of them is, but I don't know which one.
Okay, any other non-agenda items? Seeing none, let's move on to approval of the minutes from the October 1st, 2024 meeting. Has everyone had a chance to look at those?
I move that we approve the
Yeah,
minutes.
I got a couple of
Guess we'll-
things, if I may.
Sure, I think we can second for the sake of discussion, and then you can.
Yep.
Do we have a second?
Sure.
Okay,
with
discussion?
amendments. Yes, discussion. So flipping to the very last two sentences, one sentence says, this item was not discussed due to lack of time. The next sentence says, we completed all scheduled items. There's kind of a conflict there. We did not take up the bylaw discussion. And also, let's see, mercantile discussion, a more detailed discussion was to be held later. And yes, that's on this agenda. Likewise says a more in-depth discussion will take place once the footbridge is installed and landscaping of the island area is complete. So that's something I assume will be carried over as well. I just wanted to point out that those three items get carried over.
Mhm.
And on the last page as well, it says there was a broader conversation about the select board's role in overseeing the MRCAC and the town manager. And then it says the majority of board members. I think in the minutes, we need to avoid using words like majority unless there is actually a vote taken and a clear majority expressed. So I would simply say some of the board members were concerned. I think
Okay.
that contains what we're trying to express.
Which
Right here, this,
majority of,
in the last page of the minutes.
Sorry. That's the very last full paragraph.
I think there was general consensus that the select board should be letting the committee work as autonomously as possible. I mean, I just want to make sure.
But I think Ken's point is taken because we didn't take a vote on anything. So to say that board members were concerned rather than the majority.
Yeah. Board
What was
members.
that?
I think that sounds,
Okay.
it's interesting catch, but
Yep.
I think that is appropriate. If no vote, then how do we know?
Yep.
But to say something was discussed?
Yeah.
Sure.
So we have a motion to approve the minutes as
With those amendments.
with those amendments and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Excellent. Okay. Next, we have the introduction of new firefighters. Yay.
All right, so this speaks to a piece of Chris's request for an update on the fire department.
Yeah.
Not all of it, but the personnel-related side of it all. So Matt, do you want to do the honors of introducing everyone, or would you
Sure.
want to?
Yeah, no, I can do that. Yeah, so I'm here for the chief. He's on a much-deserved vacation. So, so for those who don't know, we hired 3 new positions that was voted on this past summer. And then we had another position to fill from our former assistant fire chief, Andrew Lowe. And so we had to hire for his position as well. When we started, we were concerned, just like I'm sure everybody is who's hiring, being able to actually get applications and qualify people. And we were pleasantly surprised. I think we had 8 applications. We have another person apply with a letter of interest if we ever do any more new positions in the future. And to start, we hired Andrew's position out first. He was an assistant chief, and we changed that into just a firefighter EMT. And we hired that with Derek J. And Derek was working at the state. He's also in the Coast Guard Reserve. He's almost done 8 years there. He's got about 9. Okay, 9. He's got 3 months left. Yep, and then he'll be done. He's also a graduate of the most recent Knox County Fire Training Academy class, and he's in a EMT basic class right now. So hopefully in January he'll be a EMT. And then out of the other 3 positions, the first one we hired was Noah Carlson. Noah works at the St. George Fire Department as a volunteer. He's been doing that since high school as a junior, and he's also a graduate of the most recent Knox County Fire Training Academy class. He's been an EMT for about a year, and so he's already got that done. Derek is also from St. George, so we kind of plucked from there a little bit. The second position we filled out of the new positions was Jake Wilder. Jake, if you might have seen him at the Snow Bowl, he was employed by the Snow Bowl until now, but he's been involved in that industry for a while. Wanted a different change of pace. And so he took the most recent Knox County Fire Training Academy class, and he's in the same class as Derek for the EMT basic class. So January, he should be ready for that.
And then the last position was Andy. So this will start in November. It's budgeted to start then. Most of you probably seen Andy. He's been on the budget committee. Andy's been with the fire department for a couple years now. He did one of the previous Knox County classes. He also recently got his EMT basic as well. And Andy did a lot of the per diem coverage for us for vacations and sick time and stuff like that. So Andy's already ready to go and trained and all that. But yeah, we've been very impressed with what we've seen so far. Everybody's been motivated, super positive, and ready to get things going. And yeah, I think the chief would say the same thing, that it's been very positive and upbeat and energetic down there. So very excited and yeah, to move forward with our phase plan. And I think we got a good crew to do that.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
So how many EMTs will that have? That's two questions. How many will that make? And the second piece is, did that fill all the positions?
Yep. So that did fill all the positions. And then we should have, so for full-time, we'll all be EMTs. So that will be six
So six
full-time EMT firefighters.
Okay.
Yep.
And what about all this macaroni and cheese?
I gotta say, they're
Yes.
already
Say more
most
about that.
popular
Yeah.
new employees amongst their
Yes.
Yes.
colleagues.
There's also cookies,
Cookies from
if anybody, yeah. if
There
anybody
be any
wants-
sort of
The search
blast
rescue took most of them.
You brought
text or
cookies?
something that would go out when there is a mac and cheese event?
Yeah, we could do the town text message
Yeah.
thing, yeah.
Can you do
The
that?
alert system, yeah.
No, we heard that you did some great cooking down there.
Yeah.
Camaraderie
No
building,
family recipe.
Yeah.
great team building.
No, it was team effort.
And we also have a couple per diem and volunteer firefighters we wanted to acknowledge as well. Shannon Wallace, Tim Beinart, Gabe Sakai, and Lauren Trebizio, who joined this past summer, spring. And they've been super helpful as well in covering shifts and bringing positive energy. So yeah, so it's been good.
So is that the total then of 10? I mean, 8 new people, some volunteer, some full-time?
Yes.
About,
Yeah. Yep.
if my math is right,
Mhm.
8. And how has that affected? I know it was an issue 6-8 months ago about scheduling.
So it's been really helpful, especially for the chief. So during the day, we'll have, 2 people down there usually. And so if he doesn't always have to go to everything. He can kind of be salaried as opposed to having to be down there all the time. And I think that's been one of the really big helps. And we're looking at developing a 24-hour model as well. So we're going to ask this next budget for a couple more positions to make that 2 people on 24 hours a day. But we're looking at developing a system where we can have mostly 2 people on 24 hours, but there might be times where it's only 1 person just because that's the way the numbers work. So we're looking at changing that, which would be really great because it's still hard to get people to come at night. And so if we could have some firefighters down there 24/7, it would be very helpful.
But you're saying right now, the way the scheduling is working out, it's better.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yep.
It was a strain
Yes.
8 months ago.
Yep. And it's provided a lot of stability to that. I had to take some time off for some family stuff, and that helped with that as well. So yes, it's been very helpful. Good. Any other questions?
We are very grateful for your service. Thank you so
Yes,
much.
welcome.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. All right.
All right.
Enjoy the rest of the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We
Thank
will.
you.
For coming.
Yeah.
Okay. Give them a minute. Loves me a firefighter. So 4th item on our agenda is public hearing endorsing the State of Maine General Assistance Ordinance and new guidelines and appendices for 2024 and 2025.
So just to give you a little bit of background on this, this is, the town of Camden is in a unique position with general assistance where we have trust fund income that we use to fund our general assistance program, unlike many other communities where they receive 75% reimbursement from the state. So when they adopt the state's general assistance ordinance, they have to be very careful to follow everything that's specified by the state. Whereas we adopt it and use it as guidelines, but we're not restricted by it. So if there's somebody who doesn't necessarily qualify under the state's guidelines, yet they're in need of assistance, we still have the flexibility to provide them with that assistance.
Are there any particular clauses in the ordinance that we should be specifically aware of, or?
No, there haven't been major changes between, the guidelines that came, or the recommended ordinance that came out this year versus prior years.
This is really something we just do, it's just the
Yeah.
same as what we do every year, right?
Yes.
Yep.
I would move that we approve or endorse, is that the language we need? The State of Maine's General Assistance Ordinance and associated new guidelines and appendices for 2024-25.
Can I have a second?
Yes, I'll second that.
Any more discussion? Seeing none. Tom, you're okay? All those in favor? All right, done. That was easy. Select board reports. Should we take it away and go this way
Sure.
tonight?
Two things. One is on the MERCAC, and the other one is actually semi-related to town. But it's something that I saw in another, which I think will be relevant.
Okay.
The first on the McGonagall River Committee on October, just being an advertisement here, that on October 22nd and October 30th, there'll be a forum for public discussion concerning the River Committee. And I know a presentation is being developed, and it'll be time for discussion as well from anyone to attend. And that the River Committee would like to have, people attend. It's at the middle school. It'll be a nice location. They've done other events there before. Again, it'll be October 22nd and October 30th. And the reason for that is because maybe not everyone can make it on the 22nd. And the 30th will be a very similar, if not identical, meeting. If there's any improvements that are noted or ways, then there might be some slight change. But the intent is that it is to give people a chance to go. For example, I found out last week I have to be in Ohio, so I'm not going to be able to make it for the 22nd.
I won't be here on the
You know,
22nd.
I believe that there'll be the ability to see it on Zoom and participate that way, but it's never as good as being, for me, being there. So that's one thing. The other item, and I with the hiring of Jeff Nathan with the Parks and Rec group, I asked Audra if I could just share some ideas, but I happened to witness when I was in Vermont last weekend, a beautiful Park and Rec area that the town of Chester, Vermont, and has put together, where they have combined a skate park, tennis courts. They actually have ball fields, and the other thing is they have disc golf there at that facility. And it was like, wow, this is really nice. It's manicured super well. They've got all of these things. They do have the advantage of it's sidewalk. And it's like, well, why is this relevant? Well, I think it's relevant with the energy that Jeff has and his desire for a four-season thing, that here's another small town with a small budget that was able to take a piece of land and make it multi-season. Their primary thing in the winter is snowmobiling. They don't have a ski hill for that, but they still are able to do things. And even though they were flooded by Irene, they still recovered. But the disc golf thing might be a lower maintenance thing to do for a four-season thing. So at some point, I look to have a conversation with Jeff to say, hey, this is just what I saw. It's nice. They have a lot of the same elements that we have at the Snow Bowl currently. Here's some ideas.
Excellent. Great. All right, I'll jump in. I attended a long discussion with the Harbor Committee last Tuesday, And I won't go into that because most of it was discussion about the Mercantile, which we will discuss later on our agenda. And the other opportunity that I had on Friday afternoon was to have a tour of Curtis Island with Michael Scaling, and was just impressed by the level of specificity about the buildings, what the buildings are going to need over time. And as valuable to me was the openness and receptivity to what the community, how the community wants to vision that property, that it's a long process. It's going to be an expensive process. There's still so many ways to go at it. But I would invite anyone who has an interest. There's lots of volunteer opportunity for cleaning up brush, initial staging of the projects that will be tackled first in order to just stabilize some areas. And to be in touch, you can look on I think there's a link on the town website to the report. Am I correct? Yeah.
Maybe not yet.
Is it not yet?
Yeah.
But if you search for the report, there's a very in-depth engineering report of this condition of all the buildings, and contact them and reach out if you're interested in participating. And I'm sure that there will be a way, whether it's on the admin side or on the physical volunteering and helping with the actual implementation of the plans, but they're welcoming community input on that project. And that's it for me. How about you?
The one thing, this is also mostly related to town, the Camden Rockford Historical Society is going to be holding an annual open house on October 26th at 10 a.m. is actually the annual meeting, which the public is welcome to attend, but it will be not that exciting. Probably the buildings won't be open until later. At 11 o'clock is a dedication of a joint project that we've done with the Camden Rotary Club, and I'm not going to steal all of their thunder on that, but it's one of the buildings that we have at the Historical Society has been rehabbed thanks to them, and so there'll be a tour of that. And then really at 12 is the main event, which will just be an open house. All of the buildings of the Historical Society will be open. That includes the barn, the museum. We have an extensive map collection, the blacksmith shop. There'll be live music from Anderson Gray, who I understand is quite the fiddler. And we would love for the whole community to come, roast some marshmallows, walk around, see the homestead. There'll be a demonstration of glazing techniques for historic window repairs by Don Rainville, who is a real history buff. He actually found the oldest artifact ever found in Camden, other than rocks, or I should say the oldest human-made artifact, which was from the red paint people, dated back to about 5,000 to 6,000 years. He found that on his property over on Camden Street, and can give a huge history lesson about all of the things that he subsequently found there. And he'll also teach you how to restore windows correctly. So that is a fun event for everybody. And then also on Thursday, I unfortunately won't be able to make the meeting, but it'll be the quarterly Camden Rockport Pathways Committee meeting is meeting. They meet every month as individual towns, and then quarterly they meet together and in person. So that will be here in this room from 6 to 7:30, and things like the master plan for Camden Rockport, the priorities. They'll be voting on finalizing that. We'll get some updates on some of the stuff Rockport's been doing with the Route 90 planning, Complete Streets policy property, their, what's happening with the old RES property and how that connects to pathways and other initiatives. I'm sure they'll talk a little bit about the Elm Street sidewalk, which you saw highlighted tonight. So you don't have to be a member of the committee to go to those meetings. I noticed that this agenda went out to 43 people. Jeff sent that out to, I think, everybody who's ever expressed interest to him. So if you just want to be kept in the loop about pedestrian and bicycle type things, I keep thinking, Ken, how great your participation in some of that would be. I know Hosmer Pond Road has been a topic of discussion, and that's something that Jeff Nathan recently brought up. So like Chris, I too am excited about the energy of thinking, like, how can we get out to the snowball more safely? How can we make Hosmer Pond Road or a trail safe enough to do that? So yeah, that's it for me.
Thanks. So it's been a busy couple weeks. I did on October 3rd go down to the Knox County Emergency Management building for the ICS training, and I learned so many acronyms.
Oh, good for
which
you.
didn't stick with me, of course, but ICS is the Incident Command System. The takeaway is that there is such a thing. So if we have a disaster or an accident, we don't have to invent the structure of who to go to for help or who's going to be in charge. They got it. They've been through it before, and the town, well, whoever arrives first is the incident commander until they are replaced by somebody, a formal change of incident commanders. Anyway, it's all spelled out, and to my witnessing, the guys whose job it is know what they're doing. And as I say, there are a lot of acronyms. But the progression from the first responder to the town, to the county, to the state, to the feds is all spelled out. So it's very encouraging that it is, the structure is in place. I went to the Employees Appreciation Meeting on last Friday. That was great. I got a quick tour around the harbor with, I think it was John Allen on the boat, and so it was all good, and it was a good event, and I was happy to see all the town employees there as well. So that was good. On a week ago, the cemetery committee met, and they are in progress. They have packaged the next section of the cemetery for cleaning. They do a section per year, and so they have assigned subbed it out to a contractor for the next section of the cemetery. And also the same day, the Historic Resources Committee met, and you probably know that the Historic Resources Committee have placed an article on the warrant. It's asking if the town should move forward to draw up a historic resource ordinance. So I'm looking forward to the town responding to that on November 5th. Susan and Audra, Chris Frieden, who is the chair, summarized a short list of expenses, and I'm not sure how to get those expenses paid for, whether that's something we can do here and now. Does it have to go on the agenda? It's a total of $890 to cover annual memberships and attendance at the Historic New England Summit in Portland.
Yeah.
Is there a?
I will say before, when I was the liaison there, we talked about that, and the requests from committees have kind of ranged from sometimes small amounts like that to sometimes they want to, to have their own budget of $20,000 or, and so we, in the past, have tried to stray away from having each of our committees turn into their own independent nonprofit organizations that are raising money and trying to encourage them to participate in the town budgeting process with those specific items. That was something that we talked about back when the budget was being set up. And I think most of those were deemed to be considered things that could fall within sort of the normal communications line. I think there's maybe a couple, like there's a difference between being a member of a state agency, and then Maine Preservation is a advocacy organization. So it's a little like having the Conservation Commission say they want to give money to the Nature Conservancy. It might be more of a policy thing, but
To me, it's a fairly normal, modest budget, but I don't know how to go about getting the stamp of approval for them to spend that money.
Well, it'll be the ones that we've budgeted for, we can go back through and just approve them. The ones, that it might be a little more unclear, we can talk about, based on the amount, we can talk about that, what we want to do. I mean, it's all pretty small.
yeah, I mean, trainings and things like that, we want each of the committees to try to start paying attention to the overall budget and saying, okay, we want there to be more money available for trainings and that kind of thing, and then making sure that they share that with the budget committee, with the select board, so that
Participate.
we're not having silos, because, the budget touches everything. So I think sending committees members to trainings, sending town staff, all of that is a really good thing. Generally, going out and seeing what's happening in other places is something that I want to support as part of the overall budget, and not make everybody plan for things 2 years out if they want to go to a training, but making sure we can kind of.
So in this particular
Support that.
instance, then that amount has been budgeted? And do they
I
just
think
make a
there's some small
request?
things that maybe haven't, but for the most part.
So
yeah, we
what
can-
would the procedure be for that particular committee to get those funds to do those things?
So at this point in time, I just need to go back through and pay for it and code it.
Usually, Chris would talk to Audra. The Conservation Commission wanted to go to a conference, and they asked me during the meeting, and I said, let me check with Audra, or somebody else can check with
Yeah,
Audra.
I
And
just
most of the
don't-
time, it's not.
I just don't remember what we budgeted for and what we didn't. So I'm just going to have to familiarize myself with that again.
So in general, I'm still not sure, a committee should send their bill to you and you'd review it. And then if it's not covered, it comes to I'm trying to make a nice straightforward process here.
Well, I would say that, they come to me and ask if it's budgeted for. If it is, I say yes, and we pay for it and move on. And if not, we try for next year. Or if everybody has strong feelings about it, we can find other areas to pay for it where we might have savings.
I mean, if they want to go to a training, they should say, go, it's easier to go item by item, I think, sometimes, to say, hey, our membership is due here. Is the town going to do this? Or we want to go to this training. Are we going to be able to get reimbursed? We want to send 4 people to it.
Right.
Is it going to be before we go and pay for it? Are we going to be able to get reimbursed, or can the town just sign us up? That was a relatively small. The town doesn't cut a check to the committee for a lump
No.
sum anyway.
Right. We would, most likely, we'd pay directly for the membership or subscription or workshop or whatever it is and sign them up.
Okay. These aren't the kinds of things that they would predict a year ahead to get it into the budget process. So at this level of spending, then I will just tell Chris to check with you.
Yep.
Audra. Yeah.
I will say we did talk about some of those things, and I was like, oh, you should ask. If you want to go to trainings, you should try to do that. So they did do some planning for it. One thing we missed last year during the budget committee process, there was supposed to be one day where all the committees came to a budget committee meeting to advocate for their things. And so that's what I had been telling them. Hey, instead of coming up with all your own budgets, go to this meeting and say all this stuff. And I said, Pathways Committee and all these. And that ended up, for one reason or another, being a meeting that got canceled because of,
Time.
because of time constraints, which, so they're probably like, okay, how are we supposed to, how are we supposed to go through this
Exactly.
now?
Okay,
Thank you. That's it from me.
all right, thank you. Town managers report. Audra.
All right, I have great news and some not so great news.
Uh-oh.
So in the not so great news, I was informed by the Maine CDC that a bat was found in a residence in Camden that's tested positive for rabies. So it posed no risk to the residents of the home or anybody else who came into contact with it. But the CDC wanted to let residents know that if you find a bat in your home, particularly in the area that you sleep in, so if you wake up and there's a bat crawling around your bedroom, or you come into contact with it in any of the other areas of your home, they would like you to contact the Maine CDC. So what they recommend is that if you can safely trap the bat without coming into contact with it, you do that, or you contact Inland Fish and Wildlife to trap the bat. And they really appreciate that happening so that the bat can be sent off to the Maine CDC for testing. It's very, very rare to find that an animal that they've tested for rabies is positive. I think they said less than 5% of the bats that they test come up positive for rabies. So they just wanted to make everybody aware, because this is an unusual situation where, you know, a homeowner would find it and be able to trap it and send it to them, and it would end up testing positive.
Was it alive?
It was, I guess it was like a lethargic, sick bat in a attic that they were doing renovations. And so they were like, let's try to nurse this bat back to health. And yeah, but I mean, luckily,
They need that. They need.
yeah, nobody got bit. And it turned out it wasn't just a tired, dehydrated bat. It was a sick, rabid bat. So yeah,
Okay.
anyway, so just everybody be diligent. There are lots of bats in Camden, and some of them are wild animals that have rabies, which is common in Maine,
Some are endangered.
and some are endangered. So the good news, the town just received notice that we've been awarded a $160,000 grant by the Maine Office of Outdoor Recreation. And this is a pass-through from the Economic Development Administration to complete a master plan for the Camden Snow Bowl. So the master planning process is going to focus on more formally transitioning the Camden Snow Bowl into a sustainable and successful year-round multi-use recreational facility.
Timing.
So it's going to be based
know
on
about
current data that considers the consequences of climate change. And, you know, the process that we laid out to the Maine Office of Outdoor Recreation was really comprehensive, coming up with a long-range strategy to figure out everything from how we maintain our assets out there over time to looking at, you know, the future investments and what are we going to invest in to best aid in the goal of transitioning this to a year-round recreational facility. So that's incredibly exciting. It really dovetails with the work that we have going on out there. Anybody who participated in the trail master planning, this would be a component of the overall master plan. Andy Shepard, who's been doing a lot of work on operations out there, his work is going to feed into this. And it's just very exciting that we're going to have resources to kind of pull all these pieces together, because a big part of the history of the Snow Bowl is that a lot of people who have done excellent planning work over the years. It's really just a matter of kind of updating some of that and pulling it all together in sort of like a cohesive, strategic manner that allows us to sort of progress some of the goals that we've had for many, many years that many people have worked on.
Awesome. Excellent. Thank you, Audra. So on to action items. The first one is appointment of Lindsay Levine as an alternate member of the Pathways Committee. And we do have a memo from Janice and a letter the application from Lindsay.
This is just clearing up the stuff from last time.
Yeah,
where
yeah.
Whether she could be an alternate or a
Right,
regular member.
right. And so do we need to vote on that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if we need a memo, but I would move that we approve Lindsay Levine as an alternate member of the Camden Rockport Pathways Committee.
We have a second.
Yes, I
All
can.
right, any further discussion? All those in favor? All right, can't see Tom. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Tom. 500. Excellent. So you got a new member.
Thank you.
Thank you. So
Lindsay's great.
Oh, yeah, Lindsay's great.
Good.
We said that last time too.
she's still great. So the second item is the Mercantile winter dockage. This was discussed at length by the Harbor Committee. Should we have Steve? How would you like to?
He looks like he's ready
He looks like he's ready.
to go.
Why not call me up?
Steve, come on up.
Good evening, good evening. Yeah, so the Merc's been a hot topic for the last month, 2 months. I think we all know the story. You don't need to tell it again, do you?
It might be good for
I
the
think
people in the
yeah,
town to
just a
hear
quick
what a
overview.
succinct
I'll give
version
you a
of
quick
it.
overview. She's been in the town since, I think, 1939, and she was applied the windjammer trade. Ray Williamson owned her, and he sold it to a gentleman who said he was going to bring it to the Great Lakes, but he got as far as Booth Bay and just realized that that wasn't really viable. So he ended up basically back here at anchor. He didn't know really what to do with it. So and then we put it to a mooring because it actually slipped its anchor once. And it's been on a mooring for about, 3 weeks now. And they want to bring it back for the winter and have berth it in its original spot, then decide what they're going to do with it. That's basically it. There's a young man named Andrew here who's in the process of, I think, buying the boat or working with Bob. Bob Schaefer I see Bob, he's here on via the internet. And, there is a berth that's here in Camden. Obviously, that was hers. There's 4 moorings. In fact, just today, I was with Two Harbor Marine. We lifted up each mooring and inspected them, and we had to swap out some chain and actually got a new block because one of the blocks the staple was bad. And I actually moved the blocks a little bit, two of them to the east, because the idea is, I think this is kind of in flux, but the Swift, which is Ray's new boat, is in the berth, and that's going to stay there. And the Merc, they want to come back, grab the 4 moorings, and be about 8 feet off of the dock and 8 feet away from Ray's boat. He's going to have a couple paint floats that walk to it. That's what Ray used to do anyway. And it's going to stay there till, I think, like March 15th. And then they're going to revisit this and either try to keep it here and fix it up, or I don't know. But for now, I think they're just asking for winter dockage, as far as I know.
So, okay.
Can
Some
I just-
questions.
So last time, I think there was sort of general support for trying to find a solution. We wanted to know if there was insurance, and we wanted the Harbor Committee to review. Are you reporting, did the Harbor Committee come up with a recommendation? Everything I'm seeing is the town should have assurance that there's insurance and some kind of an agreement. Those are the letters that, I've received. What has changed since last time?
I would suggest, Elliot, would you like to summarize the Harbor Committee? I wasn't able to stay till the bitter end of that meeting.
I didn't watch any of it, so.
Well, you missed it. It was a good one.
It was a biggie. But we went through all of the various possible scenarios.
Yeah, they came up with.
See why it would be on a
They
mooring.
came up with 3 points that they needed.
Bless you.
Oh,
Thank you.
wait just a minute
Thank you
here.
so much.
Oh my God, you dear person.
I want to occupy.
Wow.
No, thank you.
Oh, goodness.
Thank you.
Very easy.
I thought the point was for it to go back to where it was and not be on the mooring stranded 8 feet
It's
away
not-
from the.
Well, this is,
I was interested in asking the harbor master when he was up there about what are the concerns that he would have
I think we're going to get,
For the committee or,
Mhm.
before we got into the cookies.
oh, sorry.
too late.
My name is Elliot Thompson. I'm a Camden resident and a member of the Harbor Committee. As Susan indicated, we had a discussion at our recent meeting on October 8th, and we did come up with some suggestions for select board consideration. And Susan, were you able to share those considerations with the select board members?
I was remiss in not distributing them, but I can do that right now.
Well, I'll quickly go over them here.
Thank you.
Regarding berthing, the most feasible town-owned berthing location for the Mercantile is at the existing 4 moorings at the east end of the town overnight dock, and Steve has already discussed that. These moorings comprise a single berth beyond the current dockside berth for the Swift. The Mercantile and the Swift would not be rafted. And Steve described the 8-foot gap approximately. Steve told us at the meeting that these moorings require a chain gear inspection prior to use. And I think you made some comments about that. The Harbor Committee also suggested to the Mercantile owner representative, Andrew, in the back there, that private berthing options be pursued. Mercantile must be insured for liability at limits that meet or exceed the requirements stated in the current Windjammer passenger vessel agreement. The Mercantile insurance coverage must also include provision for salvage in the event of catastrophic failure. The select board and the town attorney must be satisfied that the Mercantile owner demonstrates adequate financial security to assure that the vessel can be removed from the Camden Inner Harbor at the end of the lease term. And the winter berth lease terms end on March 15th. The terms of the lease ultimately have to be defined by the select board and the town attorney. The current Windjammer annual fee is $4,500. I believe that's current. And just for your reference, just for your information. Those items were included in a motion at the Harbor Committee meeting, and they were passed 5-0-0. Other discussion items not outlined in the motion included ownership of the Mercantile should be clearly defined. And there should be a personal guarantee of financial responsibility.
Thank you.
Is that something you have printed out?
I just sent it to you. It's in your inbox.
Okay. Thank you.
So we need also to hear, thank you, Elliot, for that summation about the Harbor Committee. So some of the conditions that were on this recommendation, one was about the chain inspection, which happened today, to your satisfaction. The insurance, Chris Richmond is here, and I would love to hear from Chris about the status.
No, the cookies are all gone. You know, Chris Richmond, I'm with Allen Insurance and Financial, also a resident of Camden. I've secured a quote for the Mercantile for Andrew under his name as well as DBA. It's a commercial hull policy. It's consistent with the other vessels that are commercial vessels that are operating in town, with the one stipulation that there's no navigation. And that's per the underwriter. He wants to have a survey. He's willing to have in the water survey within 60 days of binding the policy. And he's willing to put off an out of the water survey until the springtime when the vessel would be hauled. Most of the schooners get hauled anyways in the springtime, get a fresh coat of paint. That's typically what happens around here. So also the rig would have to be pulled per the underwriter for inspection as well.
For the insurance to be bound
For
now, or for the
vessel will be able to have insurance, and he'll need to have an in the water survey within 60 days before he can operate commercially.
Right.
With sales. He'll have to have the rig pulled, but that's down the road.
But the in-water survey doesn't involve pulling the rigging?
No.
Okay,
And does that mean mast?
yeah.
Yes.
Okay. It is so helpful to have you here. Would you consider, is what's being offered, is that contingent on the boat being tied up at a dock as opposed to a
So the vessel
mooring?
would be on port risk, which is layup. The vessel, under these conditions with this insurance company, layup is defined that the vessel needs to be secured to a dock that's accessible by land. The Mercantile's historic berth in town was consistent with that. There was a paint float that you could get to the Merc from the town dock. The underwriter accepted that. You can't be out on a mooring. So that's defined in the policy that there's no coverage if the vessel is out on a mooring. The one, if the vessel needs to have navigation to get to Rockland for hauling out, it's just a conversation I have to have with the underwriter, and he'll typically agree with that for a round trip to Rockland or something like that.
So does the, excuse me, the proposed arrangement of having the Swift at the dock and then the paint float and the Merc just beyond it, does that meet the requirements of the
Yeah,
underwriter?
I did speak to the underwriter today about that. And I said there'd be one or two floats to get to the Mercantile from the town dock. So he agreed with that. That would be acceptable.
Okay.
Is this as protective for the town as the other policies?
It's with the same insurance company with, similar limits. The policy itself is identical in many ways to the other commercial vessels operating in town.
What happens if it sinks and Andrew runs away? I don't think that that's going to happen.
Yeah. So part of the provisions in the policy is wreck removal, salvage. There's got to be a covered claim. I'm not an adjuster. If there is a claim, it goes through the insurance company's adjusters and they take a look at it. But it's salvage of the vessel is part of the policy.
So in other words, if it sinks, it can be taken care of. Now, if it sinks and tips over and knocks another schooner, liability insurance?
Liability for damage, that the Mercantile did to another vessel is part of the policy limits.
As a
Curious. So the dockage is going to be $4,500. Can you tell us what insurance runs? It's not my business, say so, but
Insurance premiums vary significantly depending on the value of the hull that's covered, the limits of insurance, the protection and indemnity coverage, the navigational territory, the amount of crew members you have, the amount of passengers. So it's not every vessel's different.
What happens if they get an inspection within 60 days and it does not pass in accordance with what the insurance company would like to see.
So you're going to see on a survey, you're going to have survey recommendations from a surveyor, and the underwriter will want a letter from the insured stating what the survey recommendation remediation plans are. And until those are met, then the underwriter's not going to grant navigation to the vessel.
So just solely navigation, but he would still,
He won't be able to operate commercially.
right, but he could still hang out in the harbor, sink, hit another vessel and be covered.
Just like any other boat can, yep.
So, okay, yeah, that was my question too. So so the survey only impacts whether or not the boat can be navigational. It's not, they're not going to lose their, is it called port risk insurance? Or
They're not
is
going
it-
to pull the coverage, no.
Okay. I really want to ask you as a Camden resident and what is this the right?
Well,
thing to
I
do?
also
can't-
used to skipper
Right.
years ago, I worked for Ray and I skippered the boat too. So it's, I've got a personal, I think a lot of people in town have worked for Ray over the years. So
Have you been on the boat?
not recently, but I do know that boats sitting idle go downhill quickly. So, I'm not surprised if it doesn't look like it's a brand new boat right now. Hasn't been maintained for the season.
I think it looks lovely out there actually, but
Yeah.
With I know one of the stipulations on item number 1 is that the moorings require an inspection prior to use. Did they also require mitigation of whatever was found in the inspection prior to use? It sounds like there was something, the staple wasn't good or something?
Yeah,
Inspection?
we replaced it.
So it's replaced.
Brand new block. We also, so the trepidation basically that Ray had is that the boat wouldn't be far enough away from the Swift. So we moved the easterly mooring on the southeastern one about 18, 16 feet more towards the east to give it more so you can keep that tight and be off. The starboard quarter, that was such a heavy block that the Two Harbor Marine, even with their Gantlin, they couldn't lift it out of the mud. It was just too heavy. So put a new shackle on the staple and we're calling that good.
So it got it far enough away?
The bow it did. The quarter, which would be, so when the Merc makes her turn, her bow is facing south, just like she always has, and the end of the dock is here, and the Merc and the Grace used to be right next to it with a ramp.
Right.
You guys, so with the Swift there, we wanted to make it so it could go out a little further. So we moved the southeastern block, which would be her starboard, her port bow. That moved over. Her quarter, it was so heavy we couldn't move. So we'll have to see. He'll have to maybe bring that over to swap that out, and instead of putting that to his port quarter, have to bring it over to his starboard quarter to bring the boat further over.
Mhm.
That's something we'll have to see when we get it in there.
All of that just goes right over my head. I'm trying to pull up some pictures that I have from the harbor. Now, the difference between this plan and the plan that was talked about before is.
It's the same plan, the same exact plan. The only difference is that it's not going to be tied. So the other plan we were having is to put the Swift back in the spot she was last year,
Right.
where the Mistress used to be.
Or the,
And then the Merc would just lie where it always did. But the Swift there, the committee said, well, why not just leave the Swift there and then just make it so if it's just going to be a winter berth, have it so you just take up a little tighter on your eastern lines and bring the Merc over so she's just freestanding and not tied to the Swift.
is it, but how are people going to get from land to?
Well, so the way it used to work, as Chris Richmond just said, is that the Merc was here and there was in the winter, there was like two small paint floats and you just, you pull the float close.
Paint float, what is it?
It's a little float that you use to stand on while you paint the boat. It's like a 8 foot by 10 foot.
Those floats that look like they should not be in the harbor anymore.
That's what it used to be. They're gonna have to buy new ones because those aren't there anymore. Basically, it was a series of one float or two floats together tied together. You just walk across to get to the boat.
So it seems to me, and I appreciate Ray's need for the flexibility with the SWIFT. But if this is a short-term arrangement until March 15th, would it not, and presumably the SWIFT isn't going anywhere between now and March 15th, correct? I mean, your season is over. So would it not be easier to bring the Merc right up to the dock and have the SWIFT in its previous spot for the duration of this agreement? And then you're not having these paint floats and having the boat hanging on these moorings?
Oh, no, well, the boat will never be tied to the dock. The boats were never tied to the dock. They're always, the moorings is what keeping the boats at the end
I see.
there. So they would always be next to the dock. And then the summertime, you actually have an aluminum ramp. And so,
Right.
the ramp would move a little bit when the top wind would come, but the boats are always independent of the float. So
Okay.
that really wouldn't necessarily make it easier. I mean, so to
So
speak.
I think you do a lot of speaking in a way that makes it seem like you think that we can all just know exactly what you're talking about. And
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
so how are they going to get from
I
the boat?
kind of
from
saw the confusion on your face when I was explaining it. So
I
how
can't,
can
it
I
seems
make
like
it?
we're going to move this thing away to a little bit stranded.
No,
And
I mean,
island.
so
it's not right next to the dock.
So
and where
it
is
used to be about 8 feet from the dock, always, and the ramp would bring you to it. Now it's going to be, 12 feet, 18 feet, enough so it's going to be, further away from
Now
the
how are
So
they
do
going
you
to get there?
cross over the SWIFT?
No,
to
because
get-
the Swift is a shorter boat, so you'd have off her stern.
How are they going to get there now? You said before it was 8 feet away and there was a ramp. And now it's going to be 12 feet away and what?
And so now you'll have a series of 2 floats that are about.
Where are the floats going to come from?
How do I know? I'm not the one berthing the boat. I'm not asking this. You have to ask Andrew that.
And the benefit of doing this, keeping it 12 feet away rather than 8 feet away is
To allow the SWIFT to still be
maneuverable.
closer into the dock.
That was basically it, is that at the meeting, the harbor committee meeting, basically Ray said he didn't want to move that boat and he could come up and speak to that, and the harbor committee respected that, so they came up with this idea.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, this
so we're
was-
being sensitive, we're being sensitive to one
Mhm.
concern. I just,
Well, I
it
think,
seems like if the point is to I'm just trying to understand, I'm not in a position to weigh the relative gains and losses from each side, but it seems that the relative gains from one side might far outweigh the losses from,
I think you're overthinking it because this was talked about.
these floats are expensive, I also don't like it when the harbor gets gummed up with whatever floating piece of trash somebody can find to haul around. Like, you know what I mean by those
Like the
floats?
one- like the
they've been
docks that used to
using-
be there?
Yeah, those are dangerous. They look like, they do fall apart into the harbor.
Well, they all have the black tubs now. They don't have the blue foam anymore.
I have a simple question.
Yeah, Chris.
By moving the boat over X number of feet, does it have any negative impact on traffic being able to go around it on the other side? I know it narrows it
Yeah.
up by like 8,
Yeah.
but is that
Well,
substantial or?
So remember, for the
insignificant?
winter, back in the day, we used to have the Grace Bailey, the Mercantile, and the Mistress all wrapped up together. Of course, we used to take the floats out back then and bring the whole system in and moor them there, and then we'd bring them back out in the spring and put the floats back in. So it's all kind of a changing thing.
Can we hear from I don't know.
So does it make a significant difference, in other words, by having it moved out a few feet
Yeah.
to other traffic?
No, because remember, just up to 2-3 years ago, we used to have the Grace Bailey and the Mercantile there.
Right.
So now,
So it's no further out than,
no further out than it used to be.
there you go.
Yeah, exactly.
It just seems odd to be transport. I'm not aware of other situations where a boat comes in, gets transient dockage or any other kind of dockage, and they bring their own floats to also then add on to the town float
It
system
it
or
was just,
the?
like, so
Move a
again, when Ray would have the big boats there, the ramp wasn't there for the winter, it'd be off, but there would be 2 floats tied up, and that's how you would get to the boat. The ramp wasn't there, so, because you'd bring the boats out a little bit and bring the lines tight for the winter. So,
But if we're advocating for the process, the same thing that always happened, then it seemed like just doing the same thing that always happened before would work well here too. But we're advocating for not doing the same thing that always happened.
well, the Harbor Committee is advocating
I don't
that.
really
That-
care
That's
as
what the
long
Harbor
as it
Committee.
doesn't negatively, it doesn't.
Yeah, that's what the Harbor Committee has recommended to
Okay.
you. They did talk about the fact that this berthing would need to be discussed to see if we thought, yeah, it was going to work. That might be why Ray's here. Maybe he would talk on that subject.
I'd like to
one
hear
of the-
from Andrew, maybe from whoever's going to be in charge of the boat, if it impacts them.
Yeah, I think that I want to hear from Ray and from Andrew. So please come up.
Ray Williamson, Camden resident and owner of Me and Gemma Cruises. I have a couple of questions. Yeah, first of all, you spoke of navigation to get the vessel to Rockland. That is sometimes allowed. Will there be coverage for the vessel to get from where she is now into the berth that's being recommended? You and Steve and I are probably the only people in this room that know how difficult the maneuver that is. And I just like to make sure that there's some kind of insurance for that.
I did speak to the underwriter today about a one-time transit from the outer harbor mooring to the inner harbor winter berth. And he was okay with that. He wasn't concerned about it. He would grant that transit covered from where she currently is in the outer harbor on the mooring to the winter berth.
Okay, thank you. The other thing I'd like to address is moving the vessel 8 feet out. I don't think is reasonable. We talk about the summer boarding procedure where we bring the boats in close to the dock and have an aluminum ramp. Even in the summer, if we get a bit of a storm, it's not uncommon that the ramp gets moved around so much that it falls off the end of the dock. We have to make all these extra provisions to make sure that that doesn't happen. But in the wintertime, we take up on the outboard moorings and keep the boat about 15 or maybe even 20 feet from the dock. Because when the tide goes up and down, no matter how tight you make those chains, she's going to move. And last winter, we weren't able to use the floats because they had the blue foam, and we were asked to remove them from the harbor, which we did. So we had a little dinghy there that we used to go back and forth in to get to the boat. But in a big storm, the boat was practically touching the dock from, say 15 feet out. She's already almost touching the dock. So 8 feet is not enough to be between the Mercantile or the Swift and another vessel outboard. It had to be significantly more than that. I don't know if the positioning of the moorings, can accommodate that or not, but I certainly would not feel comfortable almost definitely asking for trouble if there's only 8 feet of separation, because the boats, with the coming and the going of the tide, the chains get loose and the strong winds from the east will blow that boat significantly more than 8 feet. So I don't know. There were some other questions.
How many feet would you like to see if you had to have a roommate?
I don't want to say 15 feet or 20 feet, because if I say 15 feet and they put the boat 15 feet away, they say, well, you approved it, so, I don't want to be the one to make that determination.
But the determination would be made with respect to your concerns about your vessel. So
Right. So
You know,
somebody
there's,
will
but
hopefully,
nobody is going to be able to decide what you're going to be comfortable with. Because I had the impression that what the Harbor Committee had hashed out the other day was going to satisfy you. And now I'm
as
hearing
long
that
as,
you're
no,
not.
I would satisfy me if it was done in a manner that would guarantee the safety of my vessel. That was to be determined, and it's still to be determined. So when somebody says, this is what we're proposing to do, and this is how it's going to lay, I could say, okay, I'm comfortable with that, but that doesn't mean that I'm assuming liability if something goes wrong.
No, I wouldn't think you're assuming liability at all. How far away were the boats before?
They were rafted together.
So that was pretty
and
close. But that was
another
when
thing.
you felt comfortable with that because you were in control of all of it?
Exactly.
That's it.
And it regularly happened that there was damage not every winter, but, many, many times there was significant damage just because the two vessels get in the storm and they're bouncing up and down. Lines get ripped apart, covers get smashed up, rails get busted off. I mean, it happens, but it's, they're both my vessels. Can't sue myself, so I just fix it.
So I just want to go back to what I mentioned before, with all due respect. Would it not be workable for this 6-month period for the Swift to be moved to that berth where the Mistress had been, and for the Mercantile to be closer on the dock for this period of time in order for the Merc to be stabilized? And then, because as I understand it, that was your spot, and it was a courtesy from the town that you were granted that outer berth, that because it was more convenient. And I appreciate that because the Merc wasn't there. But I think we're in a kind of a special circumstance right now where we have a vessel that's in crisis and some folks that are attempting to step up and do the right thing. And would it not be acceptable for this, and it's, the off season, for the Swift to go back into that other berth for the winter so that the Merc can be there safely and not risk your boat?
Well, first of all, like all the other schooners, windjammers in Camden, the winter cover is on, the boat has been winterized, all the lines have been made off for winter, for the winter. She's been secured in the berth that I've leased for 39 years. And most of the crew is gone. If I were going to move the vessel, first of all, how do you move the vessel, maneuver the vessel, with the cover on?
Okay, I get your point.
And there are a number of other
It's
issues.
that opportunity to do that. It's regrettable.
But to get back to, what you were requesting, when I agreed to sell the boat, I was told that the boat was going to leave Camden the first week in May. Not only was I told that it would be, but it was written in the contract that the vessel would leave the berth that I leased from the town on the first week in May. Well, that didn't happen until much, much later.
Right.
But never mind that. And also, in the contract was a non-compete clause that said the vessel would not compete in any way with my operation for a period of 3 years.
Right.
And that if the owner, for some reason, decided he changed his mind, didn't want to go to the Great Lakes, that he would not bring the vessel back to Camden, nor would he, and he would take affirmative action to see that if he sold the vessel, that whoever he sold it to, part of the agreement would be that he would recognize the 3-year non-compete clause. So this was all laid out and dealt with. I thought I was done. 40 years is enough. I took care of that boat. I rebuilt it, spent $750,000 restoring that vessel, and not to mention the other vessels. But, I'm done. I can't do anymore. And here I am now, trying to protect the berth that I've leased for 39 years. And, I don't want to come to these meetings. I don't want to be asked to do this and to do that. I've done everything that I could do for those vessels. When I bought them, at the time I purchased the vessels, the Grace Bailey had already been condemned. And I bought the vessels in February. In October, when we finished the season and hauled out, the Mercantile was condemned. And I had to, spend $100,000 just to get her back in the water.
Okay, I think we get that. So what we need to do right now, obviously, the plan that's been proposed does not meet your specifications of what's going to be safe for you. So that puts us sort of back at the drawing board in order to make sure that
Well, I'm not sure. I didn't say, I don't even know what the plan is. We were supposed to hear, from the owner at this meeting what the plan is. And so I'm not saying that, I'm nixing this whole thing, or that I'm not going to agree to it. If it looks like it's going to be safe, then I guess I would go ahead and agree with it, even though, whatever. I'm not saying no. I'm just saying
Okay.
I want to be convinced that it's going to work.
So in the interest of time, Andrew is here representing as I understand it, and I did have a conversation with Bob Schaefer, who is the owner of the boat and part of the not-for-profit that holds the title to the boat. But he has, I believe that Andrew is in the position to talk to the proposal. Is that correct? I mean, and Andrew did give us. So I think I'd like to hear from Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, could we just there are 3 boats there right now? Or is that?
That's an old picture, though.
This was from last year, so I'm trying to find one where the Mercantile was. When was the Mercantile there? When did the Mercantile?
That's sometime in June.
Of this year. So in November of 2023, Mercantile would have been there.
Yeah.
In the middle, was the
mistress still?
How many of the boats there belong to you that are?
Well, now only one.
Okay.
But originally, I bought the whole fleet, all 3 vessels.
Right. And we love them. And that's why some people are trying to keep them in Camden. But so you own the Swift now. The Mercantile was, who else owns a boat that's
All 3 of those were raised boats.
I know, but right now, what's there? There only
one.
Only one is there, and are anybody?
No others.
So to me, this is just a fundamental, we've had at least 3 boats there.
Why can't we have 2?
Right. I mean, when you've been.
This is not the right dock.
Right.
That's the head of the harbor. We're talking about over
Okay.
here.
So there were 3 though. It would be really helpful if we could get a diagram.
I was going to bring one, but I didn't.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So there were 3 where there are only 2 now, no matter where in the harbor it is,
There's only one now.
where there's only 1 now. So just that basic thing, wouldn't we replace those? It might not, if it's not the Mercantile, it might be somebody else.
But it was also how they were birthed. The Maddie and Mercantile were rafted together at the end of where that dock is. And that's where they historically were. And the Mistress was kind of tucked in there years ago, going back to the 70s.
So this is what we're talking about right here. This is where the Merc would be off the end of the dock.
So am I
that's that
right in
mooring
that the
they're-
proposal by
the
the
big blocks.
Harbor Committee was to dock the boat,
This
moor
is
the
the
boat
end of
a little
the
bit
dock,
further
and
away
then that's
from
where
the
it would
current
be
one?
So can
rafted
you
up.
put it back to the way that it was? It survived these massive storms last year.
But
trying to-
Ray owned all those boats, and he's not going to have a boat not owned by him bumping up next to his boat, which is a legitimate.
This is the Mercantile?
Yeah, I mean, for the sake, as a diagram, this, yeah, that's the Merc, and that is, yeah.
Originally, the Grace Bailey was
Don't see why I can't go back.
was at the end of the dock
Well,
on the four moorings.
Are we never going to be able to have another boat there? I would, in these cases where it's like he said and she said, I feel like in general, we have to trust that it should be the harbor master if making the recommendation. As long as the harbor committee thinks if the purpose was to make Ray happy, it is unsettling to me that Ray isn't happy. So the whole point is to make everybody feel comfortable, and it hasn't achieved that goal, then I guess I would rather go back to what the first instinct was.
But they did meet the insurance requirement.
Oh, yes, I want to say yes.
Yeah, they met the insurance requirement. They have a docking solution that's a little further away than it was before.
In
And-
order to make Ray happy, who is not happy. So
Yeah,
that's
he's
why I'm
n-
just wondering why.
Yeah, it's not far enough away in the current plan. And then there were a couple of other pieces in there too, from the Harbor Committee, what it sounded like, as far as, is there the defined owner and contact? And I think there was something in there about funds available for salvage if need be.
Which I think is covered by the insurance.
Right.
And are those things being met?
Right.
The
Good
only
point.
thing that isn't being met, it seems, is the distance to the Swift.
Well, I think we should
Am
hear
I
from the
right
owner,
in
right?
being
Probably hear
succinct?
from the owner, somebody that's willing to
What
say.
about the request by the Harbor Committee that they seek private berthing? The Appledore leaves in 2 days. That berth held both the Adventure and the Roseway for decades.
Yep.
I had a vessel there a few years ago. It's a perfectly safe berth. It's available. I gave the phone number to the owner weeks ago. Checked with him a while back, and no contact had been made.
Susan, was
Yeah.
that
Tom's
discussed?
got a question. Tom has a question.
Thank you. I'm curious now that we've talked about berths and how many there are. Does the town rent 3 berths? Is that the way it was, Ray? They always rented 3 separate berths to you?
That's what it said. Yeah. There's really only one berth, and the other vessels rafted to it. When they put the new docks in, that wasn't possible because the finger that sticks towards the outer harbor was where the Mistress was. So they moved the Mistress inside the dock. Now, it's a much smaller and less maneuverable, less desirable berth, but it worked. And that's the way it was. I always paid the same amount of money for that berth as I paid for the other berths, which was a little bit of a bone of contention, but I never really wanted to bring that up. But I paid for 3 berths for 38 years When I sold the Grace Bailey, the Mercantile moved into the preferred berth, which is.
Sure. I understand, and I don't necessarily need to know all the mechanics. So if another boat owner came in now and wanted to rent a berth from the town, one that didn't have a non-compete with you, which to me is that's a civil matter for you to deal with potentially, and not really part of this board's purview. If another boat owner wanted to come in and rent a berth there, and we've traditionally had 3 boats there, I mean, would you object to that?
Not unless he wanted the berth that I'm currently in. I mean, I paid
Okay.
for a Windjammer berth, and
I understand. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So if the Mercantile is in a different spot, the non-compete aside, and I do have one question about the distance, and forgive me if I just don't understand. But isn't it, if you're 8 feet away and the prevailing wind is pushing both boats, they both move in the same direction, or is that just being?
That worked in the way that the Grace Bailey and the Mercantile were moored, because they were moored independently of the dock. Currently, the Swift, which is a much lighter vessel, is tied to the dock, and that's not going anywhere.
That makes sense.
So all the motion would be on the vessels that are on the mooring.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay,
None of
I'd
them
like to,
attached.
I'd like to hear from Andrew. Thank you, Ray.
Yep.
Good evening, y'all. Andrew Eggy, custodian for the schooner Mercantile. So, yeah, I thought we would come here today with a pretty straightforward resolution. We went back and forth from the Harbor Committee to the Select Board to the Harbor Committee, and the Harbor Committee recommended that the Mercantile be considered for dockage, given the 3 criteria, right? Insurance, that the insurance includes salvage and financial backing. And I think what we've done today is present to you that those 3 criteria have been satisfied. By all accounts that I've been given, the Mercantile qualifies for a spot on the Windjammer berth that is specified for windjammers by the town of Camden. The goal of this request for short-term dockage is such that the Mercantile might be refurbished and repurposed to be an asset for the town of Camden moving forward. And the goal is not that we're going to reconvene at March 15th and leave town. The goal is that we're going to operate in some capacity in the town of Camden, where Mercantile has operated for 80 years. Obviously, with the non-compete clause, that would mean that the boat can't be a windjammer and operate the windjammer trade as she has since the time of Frank Swift, right? Which means that the boat would have to be some kind of a dockside attraction where we could hold events and operate in a way that I think might even be more beneficial to the town of Camden. Now, obviously, that becomes a little bit more difficult if the boat is 18 feet off the dock, as opposed to having a gangway that directly accesses the dock and the town. So obviously for that's the next 2 years, right? This situation that Ray's now brought forward is, this contention that he has. I'm not sure how much in good faith really it is, because Ray was given the opportunity to raise this concern at the Harbor Committee meeting, where the ending result was ultimately designed to cater to him so that he could leave Swift where Swift is there at the end of the dock without moving it to the berth where that boat fits, that would allow Mercantile to have the same dock access to the town of Camden as the other boats. So it feels a little bit like Ray's trying to box Mercantile out and now box her out even more and put more and more hurdles in between Mercantile and continuing to operate and moving forward and staying afloat. And I don't want to get into any of that necessarily, but from where I sit, it seems as though we were given 3 criteria to meet to be granted a berth in the town of Camden, and those 3 criteria have been satisfied. And now we're here in a situation where, because Ray's boat is now covered, he says he can't move his boat to another spot, but he had an opportunity to raise this concern before his boat was covered. So it's really kind of strange the way that this has gone down, and I'm not going to question anyone's motives, but if it was possible a week ago for Ray's boat to be moved, or it was possible for, the Mercantile to be in this second mooring, which Steve already moved out further, I can't imagine a world where this doesn't end up being unfair for someone, and I feel like it's been very unfair to Mercantile with the way that Ray wants this to go.
Andrew, have the other point that the Harbor Committee brought up was the possibility of the other dock where the Apple Door is. And has that been pursued? And can you explain why or why not?
Yes, so I was given actually the contact for the owner of that space, or the son of the owner, someone involved with that, by a member of the Harbor Committee. And I reached out, I called him, left him a voicemail, and have not heard back. I should say, I think that should be immaterial, because there's Windjammer designated spots for the town of Camden, and the Mercantile qualifies.
But I think that rather than, and I appreciate the timeline that you're setting out, and we just need to come up with a solution that's going to work.
So why should Mercantile have to pay more money to a private dock owner to stay there and deal with that when the town of Camden is meant to provide for Windjammers? I haven't read the actual document that says that, but I believe that it's written in the bylaws of the town of Camden that the harbor, that these spots are designated for Windjammers. So if there's a Windjammer that's now in distress and looking for an opportunity to, the boat that's been in Camden for 80 years, we're trying to do everything to keep that boat operating in Camden. If there's ever a time that I think there should be a boat that qualifies for this space, the Mercantile's it.
I feel all the same emotions about the Mercantile and wanting to do all of this to try to keep these types of boats in Camden. That said, what I heard now is a little bit different than what I feel like we can commit to in the long term. So to me, we're looking, and some of the letters that I've received from members of the schooner or Windjammer community that I feel like know more than I do, they have advocated for providing winter dockage so that we can, or you all, or whoever wants to be a part of this, can brainstorm, can come up with a long-term plan that is going to work, whether that be in Rockland, whether it be here somehow. And that is all something that I can totally get on board with. And that would include, does it make sense in the long run for it to be at the, Apple Door, renting from somewhere else? But we cannot, the question of what that boat could have happened to it in that spot is a much bigger discussion. So if this is just a path to have it be a dockside attraction right there, I think we would want to be really careful about committing to that kind of a thing. The idea to me is that everything is on the table and that you're seeking out expertise and the resources of the community to figure out what should happen, because you think this is difficult tonight getting approval. some of the changing the uses there and what it constitutes to be, I think we define windjammers by how often, how long they go out for. There's a whole mess of rules in Camden that would have to be reviewed before anything like that could be approved, even if everybody really wanted it to be. So I would caution you against having that.
Yeah, no, you're
Possible
exactly
options.
right. You're exactly right. I was just raising the idea that the boat has been in Camden for a long time, and the goal for the project is to keep the boat afloat and operating somewhere. I think the town of Camden, where she's, become an
We just have no way of
institution.
evaluating the demand for that site. All of those things are things that are outside of our purview right now. What we can talk about is a short-term sort of
Yes.
regrouping opportunity.
Yeah, I want to keep the confines of this discussion into the next 6 months. I was just raising that concern because, if Mercantile is going to be 18 feet, 20 feet in the middle of the harbor, that represents, a disadvantage for whomever is going to end up using that space down the line. I very much, though, want to keep the confines of this discussion to the next 6 months and just create a solution that is as amicable and, agreeable for everyone as much as possible, and gives the same access to all the boats.
Right, so that people could be coming on and inspecting it, could be brainstorming, could be deciding if they want to invest.
So
in
these
it or-
6 months give the opportunity for people who are interested in raising money for the boat to hold fundraisers, plan community outreach events, things like this. People that care about the boat have time to essentially come together and decide if they want to give to a project like this, or if the boat wants to go somewhere else, if there's new ideas for the boat. That's really the point of giving Mercantile winter dockage. And, it's possible that could be done from 20 feet off the dock. It's possible it could be done 8 feet off the dock, but it's really not possible if you guys turn us away today and say, you can't stay on the town of Camden's dock.
Audra.
So I just want to try to help bring this
Yeah,
all back around.
please.
So from your perspective, the select board perspective, is the sticking point raise concerns about the berthing slip and the safety of the
Seems
Swift?
so. to me.
No, I
Well-
mean,
Well,
okay.
let's just go with that for a minute.
Well,
Let's not
okay, let's
complicate
just-
it needlessly.
Would you say that there's enough of you where that's something that you're concerned about?
I would like to know if there's a factual
Well,
concern.
Actually, so this is what I would like to do. So if that is a concern,
Yeah.
and Ray is saying, I'm not telling you how far away it needs to be or doesn't need to be, because I don't want the liability of saying it's X amount of feet and it's not.
Okay.
Steve, in your professional opinion as the harbor master, what is a safe distance
Yes.
that the Mercantile can be moored at away from where the Swift is on the dock?
Exactly.
Thanks for putting me on the spot there, Audra. The southeastern mooring, which is if the Merc makes your 360 coming back from the bay
Be simple.
How about we let Steve decide? We approve it tonight contingent upon Steve places the mooring however far, and if he needs another couple days to think about how,
yeah, well, I mean,
that's what he does with most things.
that one mooring that we couldn't lift up, I would like to get that a little more to the east to be safe. Then I know we can put the Merc as far out as we want if we can get that mooring. That might mean if we can't lift it we literally couldn't lift it out of the mud. We may have to put a new mooring in. I don't know if the town wants to do that. I mean, so.
How far, what do you mean? We can put it out as far as we want.
No, he can't move it. It's heavy. How much would a new mooring cost? About
$4,000.
Why can't we, and it's not safe where it was before?
I would say 80%. It's 90%. It's going to be safe there. There's no if.
Why we have insurance, right? That's
Yeah,
why we're
if the
demanding.
Mercantile comes in and takes up as tight as they can on that, and cross it over to the port quarter, it's going to be hard pressed for that to come over and touch the Swift.
At where the moorings are now.
Where the moorings are.
How can we be in a position to evaluate this? This is the job of an insurance company and a professional harbor master to decide
Yeah.
what is
No, the easiest thing to do is to tell Ray to move that boat back to the berth it was last summer.
Okay.
And just say, sorry, Ray, sorry for the inconvenience, but, on a no wind day, get some help and move the boat over to that berth. I mean, it's not that hard with the cover on. They do it all the time.
Right.
That's
We
easy.
don't-
That's
we
the
don't put
easiest
these
solution.
Spots out to bid. We don't say every year to everybody, hey, anybody that has a boat that wants to compete for this spot, come and do that. We grant Ray the whatever the word is for legacy placement. There is a lot of reverence given.
I totally
to that. I
understand
don't
Ray
think
when
we're
he says
taking-
it doesn't make, it's not fair to move that boat there because in the summer, it's much harder to get in and out. But for the winter to go there, it's no hardship at all. We know it fits fine there. It was there last winter. So
It's a hard deadline, March 15th, that they would have to, that's what they're proposing, right?
Mhm.
And for the piece that's in the ordinance, basically, paraphrasing, so I don't read the whole, it's only this big. There can be 3 windjammers there, that they're not to be leased for more than 3 years. Then it's up to the select board may elect to permit the use of these slips by windjammers by lease or written rental agreement for a term not to exceed 3 years.
So
Thank you for, that's helpful.
Yeah,
Thank
That's
you.
is
what's,
helpful. Do you wanna
in
make
the
a
event that it's not being used, you can lease it to somebody else. That's what's written,
Okay.
paraphrased.
Yeah, so I would move that we allow the Mercantile to lease winter dockage in the place that it was formerly located, or do you want me to say at the discretion of the harbor master, or
well, you could say it's original berth.
and its
right
original
east of the town overnight dock system.
berth east of the town overnight dock system until March 15th, at which time it will be.
I've already got a cover on that boat. Door is set up.
We at some point, we have to accept professional expertise, and I am not in a position, and I know that you are, and there are other professional opinions, and we can't go over and over this. At some point, we have to trust that it can happen. I mean, you get. Did I finish my motion?
Yeah. Can I second it? I can second her motion.
At least you got to finish it before you can
I
second.
mean, I would, of course, I would include the contingency of proof of the insurance policy that was discussed tonight.
We would do the normal windjammer agreement with the Mercantile that we do with every other windjammer, except the term wouldn't be 3 years. It would be till March 15th.
And I guess the only thing left is the cost.
Mhm.
I would propose that it be,
Prorated.
I was going to say prorated, but because it's not the period of the year that has income producing abilities, that
Right.
we cut that in half. So 1/4 of the normal annual fee.
Can I get a second? Is there a second? We can have discussion.
Yeah, I just.
No, second, I mean, I need a second
I thought you-
before
I
any
thought you did
discussion.
second.
You will second?
No, I thought you did.
Oh, okay.
She was thinking
I
about
second.
it, but-
All right, yep.
We have a harbor committee, we have a harbor master. Let's follow their recommendation, which sounds like we are.
We are.
But just cut to the
I think we're very
expected
close.
route here.
And the representative from the harbor committee also had his hand up.
Elliot,
Elliot.
is something else you'd like to add?
My name's Elliot Thompson, Harbor Committee member. One of the recommendations to the select board is that the board must be satisfied that the Mercantile owner demonstrates adequate financial security to assure the vessel can be removed from the inner harbor at the end of the lease term.
How do we do that?
And I myself, I'd like to know who the owner is. Who is, or what person or entity is the current owner of the Mercantile?
Excellent question.
Yeah.
I believe
It's owned by a nonprofit corporation called Sailing something.
And I believe we have Bob Schaefer in attendance via Zoom. Is that right?
Kind of doesn't look
he
like
was here. He was on, I thought he was on.
Bob Schaefer? Can,
Is that Bob?
don't hear you.
Can you speak to that, Andrew? Who owns, as the person that is saying you'll be responsible?
Bob, you're muted. Searsport, Great Lakes.
Which one is Bob?
Bob, you may be on mute.
The guy with the beard. You're still muted.
You could, somebody in charge of Zoom could request to unmute, which would cause something to be popped up on his screen and. Oh, yeah, the ask to unmute.
All
Oh, here we
right.
go.
Oh,
Here we go. He's-
Here we go. Good evening.
Good evening.
Can you hear me now?
Mhm.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Yes, we're good,
Yeah.
Bob.
Yeah, I'm Bob Schaefer, founder of Seaports Great Lakes, which is a current 501c nonprofit that does own Schooner Mercantile.
That answers that.
And will you
question.
continue to own it? Will that be the ownership entity throughout the period of the agreement?
Oh, absolutely. We do have, I'm not sure if Andrew has a memo from one of our supporters or not. Do you have that, Andrew?
Yes, they've been supplied with the memo.
Do you have
Okay.
a board of directors, like a basic 990 or anything?
Well,
Just
we have certain, a small number of people. I don't have a large board because this has been primarily self-funded. Most of it, I still work, and my passion is vessels and how they can touch both young and old alike. But we do have a current person associated with our project that has written a memo that I think will address all your concerns. And
which
Andrew
person
has
is that? Is that this printed thing?
This overview.
Chris Bass also here today.
Oh,
Hello.
Yeah,
Hi, my name's Christopher Bass. I'm a previous homeowner in Camden and was a friend of Andrew and his family. He's a very motivated individual to save the Mercantile and drove down to Annapolis to see me this weekend at the boat show down there. We have come up with a plan, and it looks like we have verbal commitments for $50,000 to cover short-term expenses. The general idea is to establish a local nonprofit, put some of the founding members on it, but also some talented people from the Camden community who could help make this project a success in the long term on board. We would then bring in some wooden boat experts and come up with a 1-year, 3-year, 5-year plan and a 10-year plan to ensure the longevity of the Mercantile. We're very lucky that we have a young man who's enthusiastic, and I think it may serve the community and the Mercantile well long term. He's a William and Mary graduate. He has some good skill sets, and he's learning the other skill sets that would be helpful for on-board type things. So our plan would be to marshal the resources needed and bring in the talent needed
both to look after the vessel, but also, from a point of captaining and that sort of thing. I see the 2-year non-compete is a very short-term thing in the big picture. Right now, the vessel's I believe, when these ownership transitions happen, that's when the vessel is in danger. And we're hoping to take it out of that danger zone, and appreciate your consideration to do whatever you can do to help as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
So I do think we would need a piece of paper that specifies ownership, the name of the corporation, the nonprofit organization. I think.
So I think short term, that stuff needs to be set up. But we do have some commitments to donate to that. And I do think that the nonprofit model locally would also be a strong, when we can broaden the participation and have a much better chance of having the Mercantile survive long-term financial viability.
But I think in the immediate term, we have an entity that has been granted insurance or will be, the insurance is being written to a specific entity. So for the purposes of the next 6 months, before all of these other pieces are come into place, we do have an entity that's going to be.
I was just confusing because
insured.
Chris mentioned that the insurance policy was for Andrew and the ownership of the boat is the nonprofit corporation.
So I think, yes, that's a very good point. I think I was speaking with Bob today, and in the meantime, we would want to, there's going to be some continuity of ownership and communication between the parties, and they're on good terms. So I think, yes, it would have to be in the existing ownership entity for the insurance and those sorts of things. Maybe there would be an additional insured added at some point, but we would make it so that there's no lapse in coverage, no matter how it was, how it went.
Okay.
Can I ask an
Okay.
administrative
Because
question?
we want to, in the interest of time, we want to.
Okay. So when I'm assuming myself and Steve, we're going to be tasked with executing this agreement for the
Mhm.
winter dockage. Who am I dealing with? Like who?
Right.
Yeah. Who am I dealing with to do this? Who is the entity? Who is the individual with authority? And what is the entity that will be insuring the boat, signing the agreement with the town, and all the sort of legal responsibilities that come along with that?
I think based upon the timeliness of needing to move the boat, it would probably be the current owner.
Probably. Yeah, to Audra's question, what people don't have the advantage of seeing is the select board overview. And the first sentence in the second paragraph reads, the current ownership of Mercantile is looking to transfer ownership to another entity. And that's probably why it's a little confusing about
But here's the
who
current
owns
ownership.
this,
Well,
is
it's-
that the current ownership is looking to transfer. And Allison asked the question earlier, is that the case that they're looking to transfer ownership, yes or no?
Yeah, we need a responsible party. I mean, it almost feels like this isn't quite ready for the select board. It needs to be written, and it needs, we can have a discussion here about who the owner is.
Well, I think
I mean, we
we're
want to
just-
say yes, but this is just too much.
So
You've got to have that, like the insurance policy has to reference the owner, and it has to be written, and it has to be a real entity, and.
This select board overview is a lot of a plan. There's a lot of will establish, will apply for, will be hired. There's a lot of will as compared to, is there any?
Yeah, but
Right,
the
and all those
the second sentence of the first paragraph says the current ownership of Mercantile
Which doesn't even
is
reference
enough.
that, what
But
is
let me
that
finish.
say?
this is the entity that is the current owner and to whom the insurance in that name, the insurance policy is being issued, I would assume,
So I can
in the name of
clarify.
Searsport Great Lakes. And then
So-
all the other plans are subsequent, but right now we have this.
I can clarify just a little bit. Andrew is acting as the current owner's representative this evening. I'm here to help provide some comfort to the select board that there are some individuals, responsible older individuals with some business experience standing by to help for the next phase of Mercantile's life. And that's what we're looking to do. Is to provide some continuity for the boat.
So there was the third contingency, the third criteria, right, was that there was financial backing adequate to remove the boat on March 15th should everything fall flat and the mission to save Mercantile essentially fails or I get hit by a bus.
Can we drop it off at
and this
Staff's house?
In the big picture, there would be a nonprofit board that would have lots of community members on it. So the Mercantile will be insulated from, a single individual having a problem and causing a problem for the boat. That's the big picture. Is that we want to bring in people that have the technical skills and you're very lucky in the fact that you have the shipwrights and the captains and have run windjammers. This would be much more difficult any other place to do this. But in Camden, the talent exists, and keeping the Mercantile there would also be good for the local economy because there'll be year after year of work done on the boat.
Yeah, that's okay. We're going to call this question now because I think we've covered it.
Can I ask?
Okay.
We just heard Bob say that he was the founder of whatever it is, Seaport's Great Lakes. Well, out of curiosity and trying to find out who I will be dealing with, I looked this up through the Secretary of State. Bob not only is not the founder, he's not the president, the vice president, the treasurer, the secretary, he's simply a board member. And I don't think that if we're dealing with that organization, I didn't bring the paper with me, but I have the man's name. I thought it might be a little invasive to call him directly to find out what his feeling is. But the same person is the founder, president, vice president, treasurer, and secretary. His wife is on the board, and now lately, Bob is on the board. So I'm not sure we're getting all our facts straight here, but I think everybody should be aware of what actually is going on.
Yeah, but this isn't your area of expertise, so nonprofit law and all of that, I think is.
You don't have to be an expert to call the Secretary of State and find out when the corporation was founded.
That's why we're asking for documents that have proof of ownership and.
So we have a motion and a second. We've had lots of discussion. I want to just know from you, Audra, do you feel like you have what you would need to draft an agreement that would indemnify the town and meet the criteria that have been laid out?
I think as soon as the ownership question is answered and I feel good that I understand who owns it and who's going to be responsible, then yes. And I feel like to answer that question, it looks like I'm going to have to do some research.
So should we amend the motion to add that provision that once
I think that this is
the ownership question is satisfied?
I really want to say yes to this, like almost too much. And I feel like what we're doing right now is going to be adding a lot of work for town staff that is just a little too much. The
Well,
waiting.
I can tell you this, I'm not going to speak with Andrew and Bob and Christopher separate. I'm not going to be speaking with three different people. I need one point of contact who's responsible and who's going to be signing this and who I can look to some sort of certificate and purchase and sales agreement and say this person owns it.
They
And that
can
is the
come back
person I
and-
need to be dealing with. And I just want to make that clear because I don't want to let anyone down or disappoint anyone, but that's what we have to do to make sure that we're protecting the town's interests.
Mhm.
Because I want to see this work as much as anybody else here. But
So
if
would
we
you
don't have a
prefer-
clear idea of who's the owner and who's responsible, we don't really have anything. And that's been the big frustration for me throughout this whole thing is that we've got a town full of people who are desperately trying to help and no clear idea of who we really need to be dealing with and who's in charge and who's responsible. And it's been a lot of different, and I really appreciate what you're trying to do, Andrew. I get it. You know, I've been 24 and in love before. I know how it is. But like, as far as I know, you don't officially own the boat. I believe Bob does. And I hadn't had one conversation with Bob, so.
All right, I would agree.
Am I able to address the board?
I think that,
This can wait 2 weeks. The only
Yeah.
downside to them waiting 2 weeks is that they have to pay, if I'm understanding correctly, they're going to have to pay for a mooring for longer at Lyman
I
Morse.
think Lyman Morse doesn't want to keep them on that mooring any
Well,
longer.
that's not
Can-
a,
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
I was told
I don't want to interrupt, but I keep hearing points that I feel I must address and clear up. I am the owner and responsible for this vessel. Seaports Great Lakes, though it's owned by a nonprofit, ultimately human beings that set and take responsibility for these entities are who you deal with. So I am in full responsibility, and I don't feel it will be difficult for me to have Andrew be appointed if it be more convenient to be my representative there in Camden as we, deal with a lot of things around town as we develop the nonprofit. So for this particular meeting, I would like to be able to have Andrew take that authority to sign documents, et cetera, on behalf of Seaports Great Lakes.
you need a board of directors to do that. I mean, that's not how nonprofits work. It's a nice idea that we all share responsibility, but any of us who've served on nonprofit boards, that's not how it works. People can walk away. People do walk away. It's the nonprofit that ultimately owns it and is responsible. And any one of you.
Bob, if you're the owner, you're the one that we need to have the agreement
That's
with.
fine with me if that's what. it will
Your
make
name needs to be on the insurance policy. That's how it needs to
That's
be.
fine. If that's agreeable with Chris Richmond and the insurance, I would love to do that.
This should be brought to us and all in writing, and we should be approving that, not assigning auditor to work this out over the
so
next 2
why
weeks.
don't we, if we
Could we add
we could
to-
take the, let me just
Well-
think out loud for 1 second. Do you think it's appropriate to, in the interim, to have the agreement be drafted and then come back to us?
I was going to say that is normal procedure with the Windjammer agreements, the day sailor, like they all come to you for final approval. So that's a completely normal process that we go through for
Which
all of
means the
these.
boat can't move until, right? That would mean it can't move
Yeah,
until.
can't move.
From my understanding, that boat can stay on a mooring and they just have to pay more. And again, just like it's not our concern whether they've tried as hard as they can for it to stay at the Appledores dock or not. I agree. That's nothing we need to be talking about here, whether they can prove they've tried everywhere. We also can't be like, well, I don't know if Lyman Morse wants him to stay.
Right.
Lyman Morse doesn't have a lot of options, right?
So
I'd be willing to come back in a week for some quick Zoom emergency meeting if that was proven to be necessary, but.
I'm not available next week, but
So Bob
So
said
we-
he would do it. We,
Yep.
we've got the way that we do this for all the others. So it theoretically shouldn't take too long.
That is wonderful. I appreciate your cooperation in this matter.
So should we complete the motion?
Do you want to table? Because I feel like you don't need to vote on anything. You gave me good direction.
Okay.
You know what.
Are you comfortable with that?
Well, I don't
I
want to
really wanna-
relitigate all
all
of
of
this in 2 weeks.
No,
I
nor
think
do
that So I kind of would like to vote contingent on it being.
Yeah, we have a motion made and seconded.
Right.
We have to deal with it in
We've
some
had-
manner.
Yep.
What do you think, Tom?
I think we need to vote on the motion made and seconded because
Oh, I
that's
know.
what we are.
I'm just curious how you think we should vote.
Could
Well,
we
you'll see.
read I have no idea where the motion stands, how it reads.
So
That we, for the cost of a quarter of the annual fee, we allow the Mercantile to lease winter dockage in its former berthing location contingent upon proof of insurance that provides the insurance that was discussed tonight, and along with proof of ownership and a designated contact person.
So does this mean that you're telling me now that I have to tear my winter cover apart and move the vessel in anticipation of the possibility that this might happen?
You can make that decision. Yeah, possibly you might want to prepare for that, because if they get all of their ducks in a row and they provide us with all of those things that we're voting on right now, that would mean that we would.
And I'm going to have the
People
berth
vote
that
on
I
that.
paid for 39 years, over $500,000 I've given the town, that I'm going to be kicked out of that berth.
Put back in the one that you were before temporarily for the winter. Because we
Doesn't seem
all
fair.
love the boat so much that you helped to bring to Camden and help to keep here. And so,
Yeah, and it's like,
great thing. So I think we have
Yeah,
to.
we've got a motion and a second.
Why are we
And lots of
specifying the
discussion.
fee?
I think we have to, otherwise it's
Yeah, the
not going to cost them.
looking at the ordinance, the select board has a requirement to go ahead and set the fee.
So the only fee I've seen is $4,500. That's for an annual.
That's
fee.
the annual fee. Go ahead.
I'm sorry to interject here. That is what I understand to be the annual fee for operating
Windjammer.
commercial passenger vessel. That is not the fee for winter berthing.
Right, that's why we're setting it. And
It would be
honestly, I
about
just came up with the best-
$375.
What?
What you said would be about $375.
No,
No,
it's
it'd be
not.
around a-
45
around
divided by 2, and then 4,500 divided by 2, and then that gets divided by 2 again.
Oh, I thought you meant divided by 4.
I think that's the
45,
same.
4,400.
No, divided by
No.
4 twice, sorry.
No,
1,100. about
No, it's 6
Divided by
months.
3, then divided by 4.
So
1,100.
1125.
that sounds like what I suggested.
Yeah,
And that, of course, is not the largest issue here. So, I mean,
right. We have,
and all of that is subject to the final review of the.
and then we would review the agreement at our next meeting.
So the motion's been made, and then
And I seconded. All those in favor? Okay, 4-0-0.
oh, do we want to?
about
Oh, you're in
opposed?
favor. Oh, and one opposed. 4-0-1.
Thought we were going to find out. Chris was recusing himself all of a
Okay.
sudden. I'm a
Okay,
partial owner of the.
all right, we're going to move on.
All right.
Okay. Oh, boy. Now let's open another discussion of the paid parking.
Would you like to give me, or would you like me to give you all an overview of the work done in the it'll be a summary of the memo that I put in the packet. Yes,
Please,
would that be helpful? Okay.
please.
It's an action item. All right, so the memo that you have in your packet, I'm just going to quickly summarize that for folks at home. So in recent times, and this doesn't take into account many years where this issue's been revisited, the issue of paid parking in Camden, there have been numerous groups over the decades that have looked at this. I'm just going to summarize the recent work that's been done on it. So we did a comprehensive parking management study in 2022. More recently, in 2023, our consultant John Burke did a revenue cost projections report. And most recently, there was a 2024, just August of 2024, updated survey of parking utilization. So collectively, these reports provide a strong rationale for implementing a seasonal paid parking program in the downtown core of Camden. And the goal would be addressing parking demand during peak tourist months, improving parking management, and generating revenue to offset debt service for road infrastructure upgrades, which would effectively reduce the property tax burden. So some of the key findings that have come out of all of these reports: we continue to have high parking demand during the peak season. So on-street parking consistently exceeds 85%. 85% or over is when you have a lot of people that start to circle around, and it really impacts your traffic. And about 1/3 of the traffic that you have in town, by a lot of studies, is really people that are just circling around and looking for parking spaces. So you want to be under that effective capacity, but we are consistently exceeding that during peak hours, particularly in the prime downtown areas where people want to park near the waterfront and the shops. So this leads to traffic congestion, as I talked about before, and limited availability of parking. There's also low turnover in the high demand areas, and a lot of this is caused by downtown employees who shuffle their cars in the 2-hour zone. And this reduces the availability of parking for people who are there on more of a short-term basis. Because if you're an employee in downtown, like myself, you park for pretty much the entire workday before you leave. So it's very difficult for people who are parking on a short-term basis to go into a shop or to do other things, other business in town, to find a short-term space. The private parking lots are incredibly underutilized, and that's because a lot of them you have to pay to use them, or you have to be some sort of member of whatever group that owns them, whereas public lots are all free. So there's really high demand in the public parking lots, whereas the private lots are very underutilized, and they're about at 50% occupancy on average. There's been a lot of positive impact from the implementation of the paid parking program at the public landing, as well as increased enforcement efforts. So when the 2022 study was first done, the surveying to look at parking occupancy happened in summer of 2021, and there was really poor compliance with posted time limits and turnover rates. This was especially true at the public landing. Now that paid parking has been introduced, it's led to a real reduction in violations and people who are staying for a very long time. And it's turning over more regularly, which is the goal of a paid parking program. And it reduces the need for constant enforcement. Revenue generation potential is very high from the implementation of a paid parking program. So it's projected to generate over $638,000 of revenue annually. The majority of that, so $531,000, would be from metered parking. Another close to $6,000 would be permit fees, and about $101,000 would be from parking citations. So, this revenue, it's pretty specific in statute that if you're collecting revenue from on-street paid parking, it needs to be used to support things like road infrastructure improvements. And that can help offset property tax burden. As everybody knows, we just had residents approve a bond, and a lot of that will be improvements in the roadway, and the debt service could be funded by a paid parking program. So some of the recommendations that have come out of all of these reports is to implement a seasonal paid parking program. So it would start on Memorial Day weekend. It would end on Indigenous Peoples Day weekend in October. And this is the period when the tourist demand is the highest, and would regulate this demand to ensure that there's turnover in the short-term parking spaces and they're available. The rate recommended would be $2 per hour for on-street parking in the downtown core as well as the downtown lots, and designated areas for permit areas for employees, and also permits for residents is something that we've talked about implementing as well. We should also be working more with the private parking lot owners to expand the use of those lots, continue with the strong enforcement effort, especially during the peak season. And this part of this would be funding another parking enforcement officer, because the area that we have is just too large for one officer to cover effectively. And that's going to be really important if we have a paid parking program as well, because it's not just the enforcement, but it's also more of a liaison role where you're explaining to people how the system works and trying to make sure that people are available to answer questions. Offering residents discounts will be very important to this, because the goal is not to raise money from local taxpayers. It's to reduce cost burden on them. And it was found recently from the survey that was done in August that I think 11.8%, so just under 12% of the license plates parking in the downtown area are actually registered to Camden residents. So that gives us a good idea of, for our financial model, what that would look like. But that's a really important part of all of this, is ensuring that we're targeting the people that we want to be, which are the people who are visiting Camden, and getting them to help pay for the costs of the burden they place on our infrastructure and services. And the utilization of revenue for town improvements, like we spoke about before. So those are sort of the main findings and rationale for implementing the paid parking system. I've asked John Burke to be available. So he's the consultant that we've worked with throughout this, who prepared all the reports, and would be happy to answer any questions.
I'd like to ask, is there a specific area that's been considered for the expansion beyond the public landing?
Yes, so that would be the entire sort of downtown core area. So I believe I'll tell you the exact page in your packet. John did maps showing, what the program would look like, what the recommended program would look like.
So this is from the 2022 report that's in the packet?
Yes, and I'll
The
find
part
that
with the
page.
circle?
Yes.
Okay. So but that includes, like, in front of the post office, those spots and that have been designated as 15-minute spots, for those would be included as paid spots?
Audra, if you want me to jump in, I can on
Yeah,
this.
I'd love to.
Yeah.
Yep. Good evening, everybody. As far as the paid area, it'd basically be the entire 2-hour zone. So your timed parking zones throughout the downtown. And there is a map, as Audra said, in that packet. The 15-minute, the assumption was that the 15-minute, 20-minute spaces would remain free. So people could easily go in and out of the post office or a loading zone. Of course, some communities charge for that and they get better turnover on it, and but others keep it free. So that's always an open question, but we assumed it would remain free. And then in the lots, you have paid parking in the public landing already. You would have paid parking in the proposed in the public safety building lot, and then the two small retail lots downtown, the Mechanic Street and Washington Street, very small lots that would also be paid. The lot at the top of the hill, Knox Mill, would remain free. And so hopefully those folks that wanted to didn't want to pay the convenience rate at the public safety building lot, would just, and pay for a discounted permit there, say an employee, they may just go over across the street and park for free. So that essentially would be sort of the plan for the paid section.
So it's page 56 in your packet. Oh my, I'm way off. Okay.
Is there, I've only used the kiosk one time this summer, and I didn't use the app. It's possible to just use the kiosk without having the app on your phone. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, 40 kiosks, is that the right count? And what's a kiosk? How big is it? Does it stand in the sidewalk?
Is it like
Yeah.
the ones on the public landing, or is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the 40 is assumed for, they in a lot, the lots would take, usually 2 for the bigger lots. So public landing, I think, has 2, I believe, and public building, the public safety building lot would have 2, and then the 2 small lots downtown would just have 1 each in them. On the street, a single, and they're very small now, small profile pay stations for the street, smaller than you see in the lot if you go to the public landing lot. But they usually handle anywhere from 8 to 12 parallel parking spaces, 1 kiosk for 8 to 12 parallel parking. But if they're head-in spaces, let's say like Bayview, and I'm blanking out on the name of the street. Is it
Chestnut.
By the library?
Atlantic Ave.
Atlantic, sorry. In Atlantic, where you have head-in parking, they can handle twice as many. So a single kiosk can handle twice of that 8 to 12. So because they're head-in, they're closer together. So it's not like you see them every space. They're usually sectioned out, mid-block and that kind of thing on those types of streets.
In your cost analysis, was hiring the additional employees included in the necessary expenses for this program?
Yes, part-time, yes.
The full-time, I believe it's called parking coordinator? I'm sorry, it's the downtown parking manager. Is that position included in the expense portion related to this?
No, the only thing that's in there is the hiring of additional part-time enforcement personnel. The existing staff is considered an existing cost, but if you were to hire a separate parking manager, a brand new position, no, I don't think that was discussed at the committee level as something that was necessary.
But I believe it's actually within the recommendations portion it says summary of recommended seasonal and paid parking system. One of the bullets is hire a downtown parking manager, establish a downtown parking committee.
I think we have, did we appoint we have a parking enforcement?
Doesn't say that. That's a different part that you're mentioning, where it says expand the use of community service officers.
Community service officers, I think, is a totally different thing that I've.
Okay.
Yeah,
but let's throw that in here too.
That's what's in here.
What most communities do when it's a small, what most communities do when they start the program is they do need to assign someone to that. It's typically the parking enforcement officer who's been doing the work already. I think you had a fellow there, Scott, originally. There's maybe a new person over at PD. But usually, like in Bar Harbor, what we do, the part of the PD assigned someone from the staff to sort of take on that function, as part of their enforcement duties. But yeah, as the program grows, that can evolve into a, parking manager position, quote unquote, down the line. But we didn't.
I think it would be helpful for us to hear a little bit about what is already happening in the,
So we have a parking enforcement officer that we took a PD position and we took the parking enforcement officer and we split that. So the 6 months that the parking enforcement officer is doing just parking related, that'll be funded out of the parking revenues. And we will pay the other half out of patrol. That's how we budgeted for that last year. And as far as the management, we will probably do that in-house. Aaron's going to pick up some of that as part of his detective sergeant duties or whoever's in that position.
how do we, before any of the parking revenue or any of the paid parking pilot program, how do we?
We have a
fund-
line item for just a parking enforcement officer, 40 hours a week.
And
So-
did the revenue from the enforcement
Uh,
actions cover that?
No, that all went, that parking money was always put into a parking reserve, I believe.
Hmm.
And we've just budgeted straight for a parking enforcement officer.
But imagining that it were put to the
So
same.
it was
the amount of-
it was never designed to be a self-funding, like write enough
I'm
tickets to
not saying
pay
it's
for
just,
your.
yeah.
Right. So
It was
Yeah, it
a-
never
It
comes
was a
close to-
taxpayer subsidized
Right.
parking oversight program that
So
did not.
Spencer was our parking enforcement officer, and he's transitioning into patrol full-time. Adrian, who was going to join us tonight, but had a family emergency and he was sick. He is strictly parking enforcement at this time. We're going to work him into a dual role. He's not old enough to go to the academy yet. So we will work on his part-time certification during the winter and hopefully have him certified. So he'll be a certified officer and do the parking come May. So that position right now is paid for 50-50, 50 out of the patrol budget, 50 out of the parking reserve or parking revenues.
But the need for the parking enforcement position doesn't go away if we eliminate the revenue stream from paid parking.
Right.
There's,
No, it would be taxpayer, completely taxpayer funded.
how much would you say the paid parking, actually, my larger question, what level of specificity are you looking for in any potential vote tonight? Like which aspects of the program can be fine-tuned as part of a different professional process, and which things would you be wanting us to weigh in on tonight?
So I think that the major thing would be, if you want to move forward with expanding the program, it'd be voting to do that, and then the purchase of the equipment, because that's really the thing that is time sensitive. You know, we need to put in order for the equipment in order to have a program up and going, you know, by the Memorial Day when the program would start. And, you know, all the details about, you know, discounts and, you know, like Susan's question about like which spaces get kept 15 minutes and that kind of thing. We could work out, you know, with like a working group or a committee or something like that.
And can some of those things be adjusted over time based on feedback from the community?
Yes, yeah, and John can speak to this a lot better because
How
he's
other towns go about.
gone
sort of-
through this a lot. But I guess that was sort of the main point that John has made, and that that we think is really important, is this has got to be like a flexible program, because we're collecting data in real time as we, you know, as we expand this and we get more information about, you know, what's being used and how heavily used it is. We're going to know what's working and what isn't, and we're going to have to make adjustments. So that's really important for the success of the program, is being flexible enough to make those adjustments. And again, John can speak to this better because he's gone through this exercise with many different communities where they've implemented a program and kind of started out with one set of parameters and had to, make constant adjustments over time. So it works better for the community.
So before John jumps in, I can say that we have made those adjustments on the fly during the trial period down at the public landing. We found a few things that weren't working for us, stuff that was brought to auditor's attention or the ticket officers, and we've been able to make some of those small adjustments. But that's the great thing about this system is it's, you can put in there what you want for parameters and whatnot, because those things can be adjusted. And John can really explain it to you, but those are things that we've already done. So.
Chris?
I'm not sure if I missed it, but where was the consideration for the businesses and the impact on their budgets and the traffic? I do know that down in Old Orchard, for example, they had to go ahead and remove and change some of their parking situations because of the negative impact that it had to the businesses. And I'm not sure that this addresses that possibility of negative impacts to the businesses that are there.
Could portions of this be repealed at any time? And what did they do? They stopped doing it in a certain.
Well, there are communities that this maybe worked, and there are communities that it maybe didn't.
Right. I'm just wondering what they.
Steve Gold.
Yeah.
Steve.
Go ahead.
Can I speak?
Yeah, go ahead.
At least as I understand it, what's called the public safety lot is the lot next to the fire station. Okay, well, from the point of view as a boater, okay, which is at least a significant part of the population of town, where you're collecting money from over 300 moorings and maybe 150 dinghy permits, et cetera, and recognizing the fact that Knox County has the oldest average age in the state, and Camden probably has the oldest average age in Camden, you're treating all of us like tourists. If I want to go out, as I often do, and spend time on my boat, I can't be coming back and forth and putting money in the meter, and I can't go out overnight under your circumstances, and you're forcing elderly populations to walk what? A mile, 2 miles, 5 miles to go to town on the premise that this paid parking is going to lower our tax rates, which, what, are we going to put a taxi cab fleet in town? I think accommodating tourists is one thing. Trying to suck every dime out of them is another thing. But doing it by completely ignoring, those of us who pay the majority of the expenses of this town is really short-sighted. We didn't move here last century to be treated like a tourist.
If I can just respond a little bit. So I work with most of the communities on the coast of New England, from Mystic, Newport, Plymouth, Newburyport, Portsmouth, all the way up, to Bar Harbor, have been my clients. And what we find with, fishermen permits are very common, very common. So there'd be a permit issued, I think you may even have them in the public landing lot, but they can be issued in other locations, like you'd mentioned at the fire station. So very discounted, sometimes almost free, depending on the community. So that's the issue with fishermen. So that kind of the real issue with senior, or anybody else for that matter, is what we found looking at the streets is there's no availability. But it really doesn't matter if you're a senior or not. There's no availability through the middle of the day because it's free, because for every space you got 3 people wanting to go in it. And what we see is one pulls out, another one pulls in, and we start to see a little bit of double parking as well, waiting for that. So there isn't any availability. There is availability as you go up the hill. And so one of the things that communities do is they look at that and they say, well, maybe the long-term parkers don't need to park on Main Street. Maybe they could park up the hill, and the short-term parkers might have more accessibility. So the idea really is to say, rather than having everyone go for those few spaces on Main Street, maybe we can entice some to go up the hill and store their car up there for long periods of time and create more availability that does not exist today as you come into your square. It just doesn't exist. You don't have a practical opportunity to find a space in the middle of the day there, whether you're
There are a couple of issues.
young or old.
One is how far you're talking up the hill. As far as I'm concerned, especially given the topography, the service lot is up the hill. But there are two other things I'd like to point out. You're stipulating that the private lots are underutilized. And I'm sure they are, but I think that one of the reasons they're underutilized is our zoning requirements that if someone has a restaurant.
Nope, not true, Steve. We changed that a long time ago. So I think it's really important because there's certain things that we need to dispel. So Steve is talking about wanting to go out on his boat. He shouldn't be parking in that lot, even if we weren't doing paid parking for longer than 2 hours anyway, which would make a boat trip difficult. So I feel like a lot of, we get these kind of comments about paid parking all the time, and it ignores the reality of the current system we have where no one should be parking long-term, regardless if you're a resident or not, because we've set up our downtown so it's 2-hour parking because we want people to turn over. And Steve, if you're going out in your boat and you're there for more than 2 hours, you're breaking our rules. So that's just how it is, and that's how they're written. And I guess another thing is, we do have a lot of parking that's
a 2-hour limit.
Okay. There has to be like a little bit of the select board talks and then the other.
Yeah,
I think
I would like Audra to finish her point.
Yeah, so also we have a lot of free parking available less than a quarter-mile walk from the downtown. It's just not well utilized because people want to park right next to where they're going. And I do understand that. But I think that the perception that it's a mile or 5 miles away it's just not the reality of what we have available. And the reason that the private lots are underutilized, it's not land use because we changed those rules. It's because our parking is free and their parking is not. And when our parking is not free anymore, they're going to have an incentive to work with us that they don't have now.
One point.
Anyway, there is no 2-hour limit on the service lot. And I'd also like to say that I like paying in the waterfront down on the docking area, because unlike what you seem to be implying, you can always find a parking space down there because people are coming and going and coming and going. And I don't think I've ever had to circle that lot more than once when I want to spend less than 4 hours.
Well, I think you're making our point.
Right. Now, the other piece that I just wanted to make sure, because people can't see this report unless they go ahead and they look on the site, and they can certainly see the full details of the report by the site. There's actually 6 time slots in the report, and there's only one time slot where it is over the 85% capacity, and that's at 1 o'clock. It's at 90%. All other times that are listed in the chart are at the acceptable use piece, and that is on page 3, where it shows, again, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 slots. There's only one time slot that is overused currently, and that's over by just, 5%.
No, that's not accurate.
Your reports,
the streets. Can I respond to that?
Please.
So the streets that you're showing, the entire streets. This is unusual. What you're seeing in the report at the 1 o'clock time, which really is 11:30 to maybe 2 o'clock, right? Because we're not counting every half hour. But during that time period, your entire 2-hour zone is over 90% occupied. That's unusual. That's unusual for any community on the coast of New England. That's extremely high use. That means that there's not 1 or 2 spaces available. And by the way, of those 90%, we're showing over 90% use. So a lot of those spaces that are available are handicap spaces.
I understand now. You mentioned that.
So now my point is, on the other hours that were counted, there are blocks that are fully consumed, but not the entire system. But for the entire system to be fully consumed, that's over 90%. For that much period in the middle of the day is highly unusual for any community, in New England.
So what John is trying, we have a significant parking challenge in Camden.
Yeah, you do. You've got a lot of availability in a short walk, but you have no availability where everyone wants to be. And that's really what it comes down to. It's not rocket science, it's trying to get the longer termers to park a little bit further out and have the shorter term closer in. Make use of what you have.
Allison.
Yeah, I mean, having read many articles over many decades of every time that this issue has been studied in Camden, it always comes down to the same thing. This is a highly desirable place that has become more desirable over time. And there's plenty of data to support that. And parking is a resource that is not used equally by all residents. But it's being paid for equally by all residents. And I never realized how much that is costing us. Every area that is a parking space, we saw it when we just rented out a spot to the popcorn stand. That is a desirable place. It's a place that we haven't sold to be housing. It's a place that isn't green space for people to sit, and we're all paying for it, and we're using it really unequally. And if the plan is to continue to make Camden more and more desirable, which seems to be happening, there's just no other way to fairly allocate a scarce resource. And we've experimented with getting people to different rules for how long you could park here and there, and that's going to continue. But I just, there is no other opportunity to gain $500,000 in our budget also. And we have so many demands. One of these letters that we got today was about, all of the things that we should be doing with EV chargers. How many requests do we turn down for everything from approving a sidewalk to EV chargers? And the way that other communities are funding some of those things is through paid parking. And otherwise, we're just going to be going to our taxpayers for everything. So I think there are a lot of details to be worked out, but that the paying for something is the best way to determine value. And there are a lot of ways that we have to subsidize people that need a little bit more support. But I just don't see any other way than some form of paying for the more desirable location. You pay a little bit, and the person that's valuable to gets an opportunity. It's the capitalism. It's a fair market. Anyway.
Ken, did you want to make a point?
Yes, thanks. It's a very expensive proposal. It's too expensive to try out and then decide against it. So I would like to be very cautious. Audrey, you said something about it being time sensitive, but if we didn't do this for a year, what would change? Where I'm heading with this is a huge change to the look and feel of downtown Camden, to the friendliness of my community. And I would prefer to have more support from the townspeople. Like, could this go out to a vote? Could we wait and put this out to a vote?
No, it can't go out for a vote. And the town attorney explained it. This is within the select board's purview by statute. So this is something that you all need to make a decision on by statute.
We have to.
I tried so hard with
Yes.
Central Street to push. I wanted to put that, making it one way or not. And it was like, we're going to let the people decide. And I fought and fought. We should be able to let people vote on this. And there was a compelling argument that we just
Yes,
couldn't. There are certain things that you don't.
You're given statutory authority over traffic and parking vested in you by the state.
We as having
And you can't, no, you can't, no. You cannot give it to the voters.
That's the question
Bill,
of the voters.
They get to vote
no,
for
you
us
cannot.
or not.
Right.
Bill's talked about this at length before. Also, I would say that we've kicked this can down the road for a very long time, a very, very long time. We have all the data at this point with the pilot project that we could possibly get. You know, nobody shows up at these meetings to talk about this in any level of detail. You get a lot of comments when there's time to make a decision, but there isn't a lot of engagement. And we have tried. We have had many, many meetings over many, many years about this. And to the friendliness, Ken, what's more friendly, paying $2 for parking for a couple hours or getting a $50 ticket? I think that it's much friendlier to a community if you know what you're expected to pay for something instead of, finding that you're, 5 minutes late because your lunch went over and then you get a $30 parking ticket. That's much less friendly.
At all.
Right.
Yeah, or you can't
So
find
many
a spot,
people
so you
just
leave and you go to
avoid
Belfast, you go to Rockland because you've been circling around and you can't find a spot. And that's the reality. I've heard the friendliness argument before and I understand it, but the reality is that the way that we do it now is much less friendly to visitors because we either say, nope, too full, go somewhere else, or if you stay and you stay over, we're going to slap you with a massive fine because that's the only tool that we have for enforcement. Whereas paid parking, you're balancing supply with demand. You make it easier for people who want to come here to be able to find a place to stay here.
Well, isn't enforcement still the key? I mean, people can be scofflaws with a paid system or the system.
We found at the
now.
landing, voluntary compliance when
Yeah.
you're paying for something is much higher, much
Audrey,
higher.
if I could talk about a little bit about what you found at the public landing lot. So you did do a trial, which I commend the town on doing. I think it's always the wise move. Take the most highest demand parking lot or street you have and try it. And you did. And the results were pretty profound. We saw there was more availability, in counting it here in 2024 compared to 2021. There was more availability. There was more turnover. There were less citations written for overtime parking. What we found was 16% of parkers in 2021 were parking over 4 hours in that lot. Guess what? They were all employees. There might have been some fishing folks. We've had boating people too. But in 2021, that went down from 16.4% parking over 4 hours to 1.6%. All those people didn't get citations anymore. And the 30 or 40 employees that parked in that lot found another place to park. That wasn't hopefully necessarily in the 2-hour zone on the street, but maybe in a lot or even in a private lot. So they moved out of the lot, and that was I would say a great success. We didn't sound like we heard a lot about complaints about the paid parking, but I'll leave that to the chief. I wasn't there the whole time, but it seems to be working quite well. So,
How much would it make a difference if we went ahead and implemented only those things that were like, again, consider 6 2-hour stalls on Wood Street and Pleasant Street, between Elm Street? Why not do these things that are in here about making a few more parking spaces as compared with taking away parking space? In here is also, there's a little personal interest, but taking away motorcycle parking spaces downtown and instead put planters there because they weren't used well enough. You're taking away spaces instead of creating more spaces. I mean, there are other pieces in here of talking about restriping to create more spaces. Why can't we restripe, create more spaces, which creates more availability, and not do the paid parking?
That's not how it works.
And I wonder how much it will cost somebody who lives in Camden. Will it cost them more to handle their daily paid parking than they would experience if we didn't do this? And their tax rate? Well, I bet they'll pay more in paid parking than they would be paying with an increased tax rate by not doing this.
Can I just say, that's not how parking works from a land use perspective. It just doesn't, Chris. We've created a tremendous amount of parking lots in this town. We've gobbled up space that could be used for housing, space that could be used for other public purposes with parking because we've managed our parking pretty poorly, in my opinion, to create a free parking environment for a long time. And more does not mean better, and that it's more convenient for people. People want to park where it's convenient. It's balancing supply with demand. So what you're saying, adding 6 spaces here, 7 spaces there, is not going to fix the problem that we have. It's just not. And we have evidence from all over the country that that doesn't work. John can tell you that doesn't work. He's done that in other communities. Camden has done that for years. We just recently did that. We purchased the Knox Mill parking lot. That's 110 public spaces that we never had. And I don't think anybody would tell you that the downtown parking area is way less congested because we added 110 public parking spaces. The problem is always going to be just as bad as it is now. And also, we talked about giving residents incredibly discounted parking because we are not trying to squeeze residents for this. We're trying to not squeeze, but we're trying to make sure that people visiting town, who are the people that are utilizing this service, are not subsidized by taxpayers, because parking upkeep has a cost to it too. And our roads have a cost to them that now the residents completely bear. And we could be shifting some of that onto people who are visiting here, which is only fair because they're using our services.
Just to clarify a point, the idea that when I mentioned about the additional 6 parking spaces here in, I guess it's Bayview Street, and also 6 additional on Wood Street, that's not Chris Nolan's idea. That's the idea that's in this report. It says this.
Sure, but that is not going to solve the problem, is what I'm saying. What's going to solve the problem is paid parking. Yes, you can add more spaces. We'll make more money.
Bay Road, I can think of all kinds of places.
There's a lot of places, but that is not going to fix the parking problem.
Is it realistic to believe that on Pearl Street that you'll be able to put parking stalls on both sides of Pearl Street, given the addition that there's now of the curbing as well as Free Street?
No.
Are those realistic? They're in the report. That's what I'm saying.
Sure, but things have changed since the report. So I guess, are you trying to just pick out things you don't like about it to invalidate the whole report so you can vote against paid parking? Because I'm sure you can find lots of things that aren't the reality now, because it's been 4 years.
So can we
since this
decide
was
later?
done.
Pearl Street is free all-day parking. It's blue right here on the map.
I get that, because that was the idea, to go ahead and people could park there, but because of the changes in the street, that might not be as valid as a place as it was when the report was
But
originally
the fact
done.
remains that it's free parking, and people do park there on both sides of the street.
You're worried people are going to go there to park in order to get free parking?
Yeah, right. That the report is, what is tough is when you have a report where you say, well, that's not really the case anymore, but let's go ahead with this part of the report that is the case.
Well, people
It's
can
hard.
park on Mechanic
It's
Street.
hard to determine then which pieces should we be determining and which are not. What can we rely on in the report? If we can't rely on certain things, what things can we
So you're
rely
thinking
on?
that we don't have any longer a place for people to get to park for free because of the Pearl Street changes?
There are
I don't think
some.
Mechanic Street was identified on there, and
Mountain Street is.
there's a lot of parking that could go right up. Mechanic Street is as wide as a 4-lane highway. You could, I'll go right now, right in front of my house. Anybody can park all the time.
But I guess that's the point. None of this can be set in stone. We've got to be flexible, and we've got to adapt over time, because things do change. Pearl Street changed. So we're going to have to change what the plan is for Pearl Street.
Not changing it though. People can
And I
still
think
park there.
to the friendliness point this summer, anytime that I was out to eat and it was in touch with people who were visiting, or if I bumped into them in the parking lot, I would always ask them how they felt about paying to park. And to a person, they said, I pay to park everywhere else that I go, to come into Camden for an afternoon, and then it was free after 6 o'clock. So if you come to go to dinner,
Which that.
you're
could
not
be
paying
separate.
anyway.
Yeah, Public landing's
Um,
full.
The public landing is full at dinner time of, all kinds of folks. But I didn't encounter anyone who felt like Camden was any less friendly because they had to pay to park in that limited area. And it's what's done. And the numbers for the revenue opportunities and offsetting debt service on something that the town agreed to fund through a bond.
Right.
It makes sense to me.
I don't think that this, I just don't think it's the right look for the town. I understand that in year two, maybe it's $500,000, but also maybe that $500,000 does not include the price of the person that's noted in here. There's always seems to be, there's always more expense than was originally thought about. And I do have another question that maybe I'll just have to ask a bit later too, but is there any incentive for the consultant if we go with a paid parking plan? Is there any incentive for the consultant to, does he get paid if we go with this plan versus if we don't? Is there any change to what the consultant receives?
No.
That it's totally independent?
Mhm.
That's a good thing.
Do you ever recommend that communities, like it's not going to work out very well, John? Are there communities that are paid parking?
No, I encourage the committees to, to think of other communities that have it and reach out to them. I mean, I know you guys have reached out to Bar Harbor and there's certainly other communities, Newburyport, Portsmouth, very highly successful, just like Camden, but they're managing their parking by increasing their walkability to, they don't want to have free parking spaces open and available all day when there's nothing downtown. So if they had the luxury of having if they had the luxury of having a Knox Mill lot, they don't want to see that empty when there's cars circling and circling and circling. So it's all about increasing walkability in those communities. How do we increase walkability, make it more, reduce the amount of traffic circling, looking for parking, and try to use the parking that we have better? It's already there, right? So how do we use it better? How do we incentivize people to use it better? It's not for everyone. Some people are going to want to pay the fee downtown, but others are going to want the free parking and they go for it. So, but yeah, all those communities, to answer your question, I think all those communities, I think you could talk to them. They're not going back to the free because of the mismanagement that they had down there, and it was just uncomfortable. And it's a lot more parking tickets, as Audra mentioned, to have to write those time limits. For instance, most of these communities are now starting to remove time limits, right? So in the public landing lot, when you charge, what you find is everybody stays within 4 hours. So why do you need a time limit? You don't need the time limit. And so when they charge for it, they remove those time limits. They don't write their customers tickets anymore for those things because they pay a reasonable fee and they leave at a reasonable time. And that's what you're finding in your public landing lot. All those tickets that were written are no longer written for those overtime. And you can do the same on the street. So those other communities are now starting to push to say, we don't want time limits. Why are we kicking our customers out of their spaces at all? They're only here to spend money and have a good time. So that's the other part of the paid parking, is it starts to eliminate time limits so that people can stay for what they want to stay for and pay for what they want to stay for.
And John, correct me if I'm wrong. One of the questions was, are there communities where you haven't recommended paid parking? And I believe Rockport approached you and you told them that it wouldn't be beneficial for them.
Yeah, that's correct. There's plenty of communities that don't meet that standard of 85% for a period of time. I mean, there aren't too many communities that have their entire 2-hour zone at over 90% during the middle of the day. That's rare, but there are plenty that don't meet the 85% level. Yeah.
If anything, we probably need to continue to remove some of the parking spots downtown because the crosswalks are still quite unsafe. And when that restriping happened before, the recommendation is that each parking spot should be 20 feet from the crosswalk in order to really be able to see people coming. And for years and years, Camden has kind of prided itself on getting away with doing something that is more dangerous in the name of squeezing in more parking. So I don't see a lot of, you know, and what we did was that it was like somebody came up with some kind of compromise in hopes that DOT wouldn't notice that they only did 10 feet. But that's not the best practice. That's not what the research says is the most safe for pedestrians. You know, we should be continuing to push for a safer, more walkable downtown with fewer cars, where more people park a little further away. You reserve some parking for people who need it, and more people can walk. And because there are fewer cars, you can do it more safely. That's the way really popular places are. Really popular places are not known for abundant free parking. There's barely any parking because everybody wants to be there.
There are places that I have to visit throughout New England in order to go ahead and do some of my work. And I really find it kind of inconvenient to have to then go ahead and find the little kiosk. And I wonder,
have you used the app?
I wonder if how many people will really enjoy, you know, coming down to Zoot Coffee, and then first, before they go in and get their coffee, they have to go out to the kiosk, even though it's at a reduced rate, because I'm a Camden resident, you're still having to deal with the slight inconvenience. Yeah, is it slight? Yep, maybe. But is it an inconvenience that we're asking people, even if you're a resident, you've got to go to the kiosk, do your thing, better have your credit card with you, better have your thing, better have your app, whatever it is that they don't need to do today to go ahead and go into a business. We're asking them to, I've saw people down at the kiosk, down at the town, having difficulties trying to get the receipt out that ends up going on their car and then being frustrated. I've talked to some people who said, yeah, we came here because I didn't want to go to Booth Bay because of the paid parking. Really? That was the real deal. And there are people that I don't go down to the town landing as often as I would, even on a motorcycle, because I'd have to go over to the kiosk and pay. No, so I don't hang out down there. I decide not to. And I don't want to be part of creating an environment where people don't go downtown because they don't want to deal with the other inconvenience or the other additional costs when they've already are paying more in taxes. Now you're going to have us pay more in taxes again you're saying, oh, we're spreading it out for other people to pay. Well, people in Camden will have to pay at least something when they go ahead and they park in town.
Or they can park in one of the abundant free parking lots that's very, very close. When you actually park in the Knox Mill lot, I mean, it's very, very close to get to a point where there are a lot of free options. I mean, there are a lot of people like me that live very close also. Look I drove down here tonight because I was a little bit late, and that's a convenience that there are many people that could easily take the 2.5 extra minutes and enjoy the walk. We could argue about this until we're
And it's a
blue in the face.
really 6-month proposal.
Not
6 months
even.
on,
It's
not even.
not even. It's
yeah.
Yes.
There is?
Yes.
Maybe we
Yes.
end the
Not
select
really.
board or.
I thought that there was. There is not.
I would be delighted to hear what you have to say.
It's
No.
not expected?
No, it is.
Yeah, no, come up.
Okay, since I came in.
Yes, and you've been here for a long time, so
Almost
by
4
all
hours
means,
waiting to
yeah.
speak to you.
Yeah.
My name is Destry Oldham Sibley. I've lived at 6 Mill Street in Camden since 2013. Public speaking is not my thing, but I feel very strongly about this issue, and it got me down here to address you all. There are 3 key points I want to make, the takeaways, as Ken used the word. 1 is it's really inconvenient to residents. 2, it's unnecessary. We just had a huge revaluation. And 3, the public has not been given the opportunity to weigh in. This room should be full of people because this issue is going to affect everybody in Camden who uses a car, basically. I researched beforehand what I could find about the pros and cons of public parking. I found that generally articles in favor of public parking apply more to urban areas and not to villages like Camden. And some articles on the internet are industry driven, that is by the manufacturers of parking meters. Just today, I learned a great deal more though about this issue through a detailed article that was in the Penn Bay Pilot. And from the map that you all have in your packet, included in that article, it looks as though this issue is a done deal. I didn't realize that there was that much detail about which streets are going to be have meters. I'm not clear on why this hasn't been brought up more for public discussion, because I feel like it's a really important topic. The arguments in favor of paid parking don't hold up, in my opinion. For example, the view that it's time to begin realizing revenue from visitors who drive through our town. I mean, well, we're already realizing revenue from tourists as you look around the village and you see people shopping in hotels, restaurants, strolling down the streets. Further, the argument that paid parking will only be in effect from May to October, so therefore won't really affect residents too much, doesn't hold up either. We also live here in May to October. Does the select board expect us to just not go downtown from May to October? And what about the potential loss of revenue from residents who find the inconvenience of paid parking not worth the effort of coming down here and paying? So basically forget shop local, just order online. People, whether residents or local communities, when they find the downtown unfriendly due to parking charges and inconveniences during tourist season, may not return during the off season when our businesses need them the most. If the argument in favor of paid parking is that the town needs more revenue, I find it ironic as Camden's property taxes have increased significantly due to the recent revaluation. In fact, I paid my taxes today. Mine personally went at 6 Mill Street increased 22%. And when you apply that across the town, I'm just thinking that's a huge amount of money. No? I mean, I don't know.
Other people are paying less. It's just, it's
Some
not.
are paying less, okay. All right, so then I don't know what I'm talking about in that, but it just seemed like there's a lot of money, but okay. So I feel that the public, the voters should be, I didn't realize that the voters don't get to vote on this, but nevertheless should be given the opportunity to weigh in on this important issue. This has the potential to have long-lasting impact on the friendliness and the character of Camden. And as I said, I feel like it would be very inconvenient and it would cause a financial burden. A lot of us are on fixed incomes as retirees, and it basically amounts to me, it seems like a tax on residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Destry. Yes.
Hello, my name is Adam Kolstrom. I'm a resident of Camden. I'm also the pastor of Chestnut Street Baptist Church. So I just learned about the parking as I read the article today, and I noticed that Chestnut Street is included as part of the paid parking. And from my understanding of the article, it seems that this is going to be enforced 7 days a week, if I'm correct. And I may be correct, so you can correct me. But if I do, I just wanted to know if consideration has been taken as to how paid parking on Chestnut Street will affect Chestnut Street Baptist Church and St. Thomas Episcopal Church, both churches which have quite a large elderly population who are unable to walk from the distant parking lots. So I can encourage our younger, more spry members to park farther away, but that doesn't help our more elderly people, as now if they want to attend a Sunday morning service, they have to pay to attend a Sunday morning service. And not only that, but I guess just to put another consideration, I'm glad to hear that the details have not yet been worked out. And so I would encourage you, if this does go into effect, to consider also the effect that this might have on other nonprofits, again, like the churches who sponsor 12-step groups. So the 12-step programs, now people come in and they will now have to pay to attend a 12-step group. Chestnut Street Baptist Church for 7 or 8 years now offers a free Monday morning community breakfast We've never charged the community. We have no material benefit from it. It's simply become a place of community, a safe third place for people to come in. And it's become a place where people are building relationships and strengthening our community. Now people may have to pay if they want to come and attend our free Monday morning breakfast, because to park in front of our church, they're now going to have to pay for that. So just as you continue to move forward with this, if you do move forward with this, I just ask you to consider the effect that it might have on the churches or other nonprofits or other organizations that are offering free or discounted services for the benefit of the community, but now will be taxed or charged to be able to participate in those very services. So I just ask you to give that consideration if you do move forward with this paid parking proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very important point.
So these are all things that we've talked about before, like, shop owners being able to validate parking so it's free to people. Churches, we talked about, if it did switch to 7 days, John recommended no enforcement before noon, because that's when, most services happen. Same thing with validating parking for people who might come for one of the free programs that Adam was talking about. This is just an infinitely customizable program. So, raise excellent points. All of them are things that we can address.
Right. I mean, one thing is, St. Thomas has felt that they have their own private parking lot. And I'm sure there are other uses potentially of that space that could also really benefit the community. Because of Camden's kind of archaic parking approach from the past, I think it has forced some of that. And that, I think Adam brings up really good points. I really appreciate the constructive sort of way that you're doing that, because I think that there are a lot of ways that this could be structured in a way that can provide a mutual benefit.
Same thing with residents. There's a lot of talk about the inconvenience of the kiosks. There's a way that we can provide, deeply discounted parking permits to residents so they don't have to go to the kiosk. That's something that John has talked about before. So
kiosk is miserable. I really couldn't handle the kiosk, but when I got the app, that's really works great for me.
Or if when we pay our excise tax, if we get a sticker.
Right. Yeah, that was the model.
Enrolled in the system as a resident with whatever, and it could be a senior rate and a resident rate. That can all be. I'd like
I like the point where we don't pay any rate.
Well, of course you do. I'd love to hear from Tom, just because I think that we're if we were going to vote with the four of us in this room, I have concerns.
I think we should vote.
You think we should vote?
It's late.
Yeah.
I don't think we can stay with the status quo. I think that we do have parking issues, and we should. The status quo isn't adequate. It's potentially getting worse. It is a problem, and I'd like to see us implement this.
So I would move that we move forward with the necessary purchasing in order to
implement the proposed paid parking system
throughout the downtown.
With details. How is there a way to say what we're not? I guess I just need to be not vague, but I don't need to say with the details to be worked out later.
You can with the recommendations from the parking working group to be brought forward to the select board at a later time.
I would second that.
And also you might want to appoint a member of the select board to that group.
Is that part of the motion? Are we at the part of discussion after the motion has been made?
That's a good point. We have this framework where we have a parking working group that makes recommendations and helps with the implementation at the detailed level. And so we are continuing that. We don't want to be discussing every little detail in the select board meetings, but there's a place for that to be. That was, Sophie was the parking liaison, parking
working group liaison. Maybe, do we want to think about who that person's
Yeah,
going to be at a later
let's
date?
think
My
about
brain is
that.
quite fried.
Yeah,
I would
you
like to
don't
move
need to do
forward.
that tonight.
Would like to move forward with
A vote.
with the purchases necessary to expand the paid parking program to the downtown, and for the implementation to be overseen by the parking management working group.
Second.
Are we still part of the discussion time period?
Yes.
Thank you. I've got it. 4 points.
Okay, make them quick, please.
What is the cost of removing it? And at what time could a future select board have the right to remove a paid parking system?
We could always sell the stuff.
No, what does the contract say? I believe what's currently in place, there was contract stipulations on how long it would have to be in place. What I'm wondering is, when could a future select board have the right to remove a parking system entirely per the contract?
Is there a number that would influence your vote one way or the other?
I want to know what the answer is.
I'm just wondering if it could be reversed by next year's select board with
There's
that.
no, I don't have a contract that I can speak to because we haven't moved forward with purchasing any equipment. So I can't.
With the
answer that.
existing one down at the public landing, is or was there a time period that was needing to be in place without it being removed by a select board?
I don't believe so. We purchase them outright and we can put them in if we want or not.
So are you making the case now that a future select board could go ahead and vote to remove this parking because it is select board, not the law, basically, the statute says the select board makes the decision on things related to paid parking, and that's why it can't go to a vote. Not that we don't want it to go to a vote, but it can't be done. But you're saying that any select board at any time could vote to remove the paid parking. Is that
Problematic
correct?
with a
Or
budget,
is
if the budget were approved.
or is there a contract stipulation of how many years it needs to be in place? I don't know. Maybe we're buying a 3-year license. Maybe it's a 1-year license. I don't know. What is it?
Are any purchases that actually happen, is that going to be subject to additional approval by the select board? Is that laid out?
We'd come back to you, when we have, like a vendor picked out and we're going to move forward with the purchase.
So then we could weigh the different vendors, and if one of them comes with you're stuck for 3 years.
I don't think there's a lot of weighing of different vendors with this, but you would be able to see whatever sort of agreement that there is in terms of the purchase of the equipment.
Okay. Are we good?
Did Chris
Did
finish?
you make your points? Or?
I think that was cost removing it. When can we do it? Time period. I'm still not a fan of the deeply discounted parking tickets that Camden residents still have to do. I really wonder if the amount that we're going to end up having to pay to park is going to be actually less or more than if we didn't have $500,000 of income in taxes.
Some people aren't parking at all. They're just living their lives, not coming down to Main Street to park. So it's going to vary depending on the person, which is kind of the idea.
Okay, Ken has a point, and then I'd love to call this vote.
Right. If I didn't make it clear already, the individuals and the businesses that I have talked to are not fond of this idea. I think it would be cumbersome and annoying and off-putting to visitors and residents alike. I think the kiosk will clutter the sidewalks, and they are going to be there year-round. They're not going to be out there for 6 months and then taken down. And we're expanding the staff. It does say that there will be a new administrative position for the parking management. In short, with this action, Camden will be turning a corner that I don't think Camden should be turning. I think we're becoming something that we don't want to become. Thank you.
The places that he's listed where these are similar, I decided not to live there. I could live anywhere in New England. I don't live there. I don't like how those are run. And those aren't places I want to be. I want to be here.
All the same arguments were made against making people pay for their own trash, and it's the only thing that has dug the transfer station out of massive debt. It's drastically reduced the budget, and now people are paying for their own trash. So anyway, I'm ready to vote.
All those in favor? Opposed? Okay. Motion carries.
Move
Do you
to
need-
adjourn?
Need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second it.
All right. Any further discussion? Thank you.
Those in favor?
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
We'll
Thanks,
see
John.
you.
Good night, everybody. Good night.
Night, John. Good morning, wherever you are.